Conference 2022. Our theme this year is Ecological Education and Culture, Looking Back, Looking Forward. This event is organized by the Ateneo de Manila University and the University of the Philippines, Diliman. I am Nikki Carsi Cruz, faculty member of the Department of Interdisciplinary Studies at Ateneo de Manila, and I will be your Master of Ceremonies this morning. A warm welcome to all our participants who are joining us in the Zoom room or watching the live stream on YouTube. Before we officially begin, let me read a few reminders for everyone who are in the Zoom room. For a smoother flow or more enjoyable experience, please note that the proceedings are being recorded. Please be mindful of your microphones and video cameras throughout the program. We recommend for you to use the side-by-side with speaker video option. Kindly use the chat function for your questions and comments. And since the event is being live streamed on YouTube, those who have questions from our viewers on social media can type in the comment box, and our YouTube manager will relay that question to the Zoom room. Those in the Zoom room, please don't forget to rename and put your institution first and then your name, so that when we read your questions, we can also acknowledge where you come from. And so we start our program with an invocation by Brother Chesco Labuntog of the Society of Jesus. Brother Chesco.
Hello, good morning, everyone. So let's just pause for a while and breathe in and breathe out and relish the morning. Let's ask the presence of our Creator, our Lord. Let's breathe in and breathe out. I quiet myself and slow my breathing. I feel myself soften and melt. I begin to turn down my thoughts and ask my Creator to make his or her presence known. I sense my Creator's presence around me and linger in it. And I rest in this experience for a moment. You may want to read with me silently and slowly. Our Creator, we look at your world with wonder and praise you for the beautiful diversity all around us. Thank you for the gift of relationships, our connection with people, animals, forests, ecosystems, and all your creation. Raise our consciousness to know and feel deeply in our hearts our connectedness to all that is. You alone know the full extent of the destruction we have wrought to your beautiful handiwork, and what needs to be done to recover it. We pray for all the living beings around the globe who suffer because of environmental damage. We pray for those unheard in this regard, the poor, the indigenous peoples, environmentalists, and scientists in the climate. We pray for the defenseless creatures harmed or made extinct by our selfishness and ignorance. We pray for the oceans, air, mountains, plants, soil, and all the other ecosystems, that life and health may again pulse in them. Our Creator, heal us. Give us the courage to transcend our self-centeredness so that we may genuinely hear the cries of the abandoned and forgotten of this earth. Heal us and grant us the courage to step out of our comfort zones and embrace a more ecologically sustainable lifestyle. Grant us the passion and impetus to form lasting communities that will pursue the need for ecological justice. All this we ask in our reality. Amen.
Thank you very much, Brother Chesk. We are privileged to have with us Dr. Maria Luz C. Vilches, our Vice President for the Loyola Schools at Ateneo de Manila University. Please join me in giving a virtual round of applause and a warm welcome to Dr. Maria Luz Vilches, who will give her welcome remarks.
Thank you, Nikki. Dr. Bautista, Dr. Tess Payong-Ayong, Dr. Achut Kuyagking, all our friends, delegates, presenters at this conference, especially those from our neighboring countries. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. It is indeed with great pleasure that I welcome you to this conference. In a world that is always in flux, constantly in flux, we need to keep looking back as we continue to move forward. Otherwise, we could be meandering aimlessly, and that would be too wearisome. There's a proverb in Filipino that says, I quote, "Ang hindi marunong lumingon sa pinanggalingan, hindi makararating sa paroroonan." End of quote. One who does not know how to look back at where or he or she came from cannot reach his or her destination. I think the theme of this conference is along this line. Now that the pandemic seems to be moving in and out of our daily consciousness because we have started to resume face-to-face activities, we could easily lose the learnings that we achieved during the last 2 years while coping with the discomforts and other effects of this health adversity. We look back specifically in this conference at insights, ideas, practices that relate to caring for the earth, our common home. And we sift from these ideas what we can use to capacitate our people, especially the youth, to capacitate them with the mindset and competencies that favor, foster, and defend the conservation and preservation of the environment. We need to have young people who are versatile and are able to sustain their interest in this advocacy and carve their own future by fulfilling it in their own lives. I take the case of Jenica Dizon, whose name I was delighted to find in this conference program as one of the presenters. I understand that she has a pre-recorded presentation later on, but I hope that she's not embarrassed by zeroing on her. I was Dean of the School of Humanities when Jenica was a student in the Bachelor of Fine Arts Information Design program. In her senior year, her thesis capstone project featured the protection of fish and water. I was very fascinated by her insight and artistic ability to capture her passion for this advocacy. As a young professional, she didn't let go of the opportunity to pursue an MS in Water Sanitation for Development at a UK university. And now she is the country director for Waves for Water, a nonprofit organization that provides aid and clean water solutions to communities in need around the world. So I commend her for following a solid route. And I thank Jenica. Proud here for you, Jenica. If we can empower our youth to take on a mindset that will drive them to act similarly, we can hope to succeed inch by inch toward a good future for our Earth. We want to make them appreciate the environment, to make them want to care for it more deeply. But we also want them to feel disturbed enough with a sense of rightful indignation so that they will act on what is relevant and true for the Earth that they have learned to appreciate and care for. So welcome once again to this conference. May the looking forward be accompanied by a 2020 vision for our common home.
Thank you very much, Dr. Marlu Vilches, for your welcome remarks. Our next speaker is Dr. Maria Cynthia Rose Banson Bautista, Vice President for Academic Affairs from the University of the Philippines System. Let us give her a warm round of applause.
Thank you, Nikki, Dr. Vilches, Dr. Cuyegkeng, and Dr. Payungayong, the organizers in Ateneo, UP, and AUN, and the conference participants. Good morning to all of you. In the 1970s and 1980s, the dominant academic discussions and debates in the social sciences focused on the underlying assumptions and arguments of various development models, ranging from modernization theories that hew closely to the perspectives of the economists to Marxist-inspired ideas on the structural development of underdevelopment. While ecological degradation was already rapidly progressing, economic imperatives dominated discussions in development circles. By the 1990s, however, the deteriorating state of the environment and the projected impact of climate change amid persistent poverty and increasing inequality shifted the discourse to sustainable development, which Brundtland defined as the development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their needs. By the 2000s, the articulation of the UN Development Goals and its achievement in a projected future of disruptions caused by climate change, pandemics, rapid technological changes, and the Fourth Industrial Revolution, among other significant drivers of disruption, filled national and international meetings and conferences. The disruptive future projected in the first 2 decades of the 2000s is now painfully upon us, with COVID-19 and the more intense weather disturbances due to climate change becoming part of our everyday reality. Against this backdrop, so we thank the AUN EEC and the Ateneo de Manila University for partnering with the University of the Philippines in organizing a conference that grounds the discussion of sustainability in the realities of the COVID-19 pandemic, social justice issues, and concerns for sectors including children, and as well as the existence of social media platforms that connect sustainability advocates, among others. Yesterday, the conference looked back at sustainability as reflected in the beliefs and practices of indigenous cultures and history to help cultivate an ecological conscience. It focused on sustainability practices at the height of the pandemic, what worked and what can be carried out in universities and other social contexts beyond COVID-19 to the next normal of other pandemics and global challenges, and how to actively promote sustainability and ecological consciousness in the new normal, specifically in our academic communities and the publics we serve. Today, the conference will be looking forward, sharing a learning tool to enable the reimagination by young people of a future where humans live, interact, and respect nature through art, with the power of nagging the consciences of adults. A curricular planning tool, curricular planning tools to develop an ecological consciousness among disadvantaged students with very little grounding in science at all. An engaging design and mode of delivering climate science and leadership training to students, educators, government leaders, and environment advocates. An approach that looks towards artful and aesthetic engagement with one's immediate environment for students' reevaluation of their aesthetic attitudes and lifestyle. A planetary health education framework, greater focus on young children as having the right to be protected from the research-based impact of climate change, an alimentary theology in the midst of a food crisis as means of empowering people towards sustainability and capacity building, to allow that to see inspired institutional and ecological ethics, the rethinking of religion in general, and your reading of Christian scriptures using contemporary ecological biblical hermeneutics that underscores interconnectedness or the stewardship or custodianship of the earth among many principles. Let me end by asserting that while many of the discussions in this conference focus on ecological education and culture at the university level, the development of ecological conscience, an ecological conscience and ethical stance begins in early childhood. In the late 1980s, my husband and I spent a year in Japan on a teaching appointment and research fellowship respectively, with a 3-year-old daughter in tow. Because we were working full-time, we registered our daughter in a pre-nursery, they call it the Hoikuen. What amazed me was that a significant part of every morning for these young children was spent walking around, exploring nature, picking up leaves, watching minute insects on the ground, and watching the birds fly, with their Hoikuen teacher annotating the experience and helping them document whatever it is in their minds. I imagine then those kids would grow up respecting nature with an exploratory mind. I think the challenge for us, however, is that children will not develop an ecological culture without adults who will change a way of life that rapidly depletes the power of the earth, and instead of sustaining it, and that eventually piles up more insoluble problems for each succeeding generation. So may this conference, when we're looking forward and sharing our experiences, may this be a stimulating conference for all of you today, and may the ecological education and culture advocacy grow in strength. Thank you very much, and good morning to all.
Thank you very much, Dr. Banson Bautista, for your opening remarks and also for giving us a sense of what's ahead for us, that what's coming today and for the rest of the day. Well, it is a new day. We have new keynote and new plenary speakers. And like yesterday, it's time for another souvenir photo. Let's have a record of this moment we're spending together. We will be asking you to turn on your cameras and to give warm smiles for each other and for posterity. To help us get this task done, I call on Mr. Chris Castillo, Assistant to the Associate Dean for Student Affairs of Ateneo, and our go-to guy for campus events management, like this big event. Chris, walk us through.
Hi, good morning, Nikki, and good morning, everyone. Welcome to day 2 of the AUN EEC. We have two pages worth of participants to take a photo of. So again, we invite you to please turn on your cameras. All right, we'll just wait for the rest.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
The host has stopped video.
There, the setting has been recast. There you go. All right. So please hold those smiles. All right. We'll take a photo of the first frame in 3, 2, 1. Okay. And we'll go to the second frame. Oh, we'll just wait for Ma'am Marlu to be able to turn on her video. Okay. Ma'am Marlu, can you try again? There
Yay.
you go. All right. Okay, we'll take two more shots again, okay? So please hold your smiles. Three, two, one. And one last. Three, two, one. There you go. Good morning, everyone. Back to you, Nick.
Thank you, Chris. And yes, good morning to everyone. It was good to see each other's faces. Wonderful. It's my task now to give a brief recap of day one. You know, this conference theme this year is looking back and looking forward. And so on day one, we did some looking back at sustainable practices. And the keynote lecture by Dr. Jet Yasol Naval of the University of the Philippines looked at indigenous beliefs and practices and how they offer insights into sustainability. That was followed by sustainable practices and tapping into our history, a panel that started with presentation by Dr. Sharina Abdul Halim from the National University of Malaysia, who talked about geoparks in Langkawi. Professor Emeritus Fernando Shalcita from Ateneo de Manila talked about lifestyles for a smaller planet. And he zoned in on recovering forgotten wisdom on food, fashion, and architecture. He was followed by Associate Professor Dr. Sainal Abidin Sanusi from the International Islamic University of Malaysia, who talked about activating the meanings and philosophy of sejahtera, a concept of both peace and prosperity. While Honorable Teddy Bagilat shared about the role of indigenous peoples in community conserved and protected areas. I will borrow a phrase from architect Sadaf from the National University of Singapore, who remarked that many presentations from yesterday's morning engaged our spiritual core. It was a morning of wonder, of storytelling, of naming spirits, naming our mountains, of relishing our words and their meanings, of sejatera or even chukup. It was a morning of placemaking, be it in the rice fields of our keynote speaker's youth, or the geoparks of Langkawi, or the angels of rice in the Thai countryside, or Honorable Teddy Bagilat's Kiangan landscape. Professor Bruce Shalcita told us hard truths about the need to rethink our addiction to rice, of revaluating the crops that we have devalued. And I listened to his prescription to wear our native fibers. And so right now we could wear our clothes over and over again. He reminds us. Now, the second panel that looked back at more recent history emphasized the gains in ecological education during the pandemic. Be it in Malaysia, Singapore, or Thailand, all our three speakers, Professor Leong Chun Heng from Sunway University in Malaysia, or architect Sadaf Ansari from the National University of Singapore, and Dr. Vorapat Nakurit from Chulalongkorn University in Thailand, shared stories that, though different, also had similar focus on experiential learning. While explaining the singularity of their specific universities' experiences, still a common picture emerged, an underlying thread that unifies our region's experience with a pandemic that brought headaches, as well as many unexpected gifts. In the words of Professor Leong Chung Heng, that period came with a lot of energy, innovation, and momentum. The challenge moving forward is how to carry and build on those gains. Our speakers ended our morning session on a positive note, confident in the direction of our dreams and our capacity to pursue them. Our opening keynote speaker, Dr. Jet Yasol Naval, entitled her keynote lecture, From Encanto to Ecological Conscience. And of course, by encanto, she meant mythical environmental spirits, but encanto in Spanish can also mean charm or enchantment. And truly, yesterday morning's panel was a very enchanting one, imbued with its own kind of magic, the type that can re-energize a disenchanted advocate. It was a morning to calm any eco-anxieties. The enchantment continued in the afternoon. We learned more about best practices in ecological education and promoting such to the youth in particular in parallel paper presentation sessions in our small breakout groups. The names of paper presenters are too many for me to mention here, and I think that's a happy problem to have, that we had lots of participants, including senior high school students whose paper made it through the vetting process. There was also, of course, a workshop facilitated by Dr. Laris Hamero and Mr. Rex Ruiz of Earth Ed PH, and co-hosted by My Climate Risk Hub of Ateneo de Manila. Participants played the role of world leaders of developed, emerging, and small island nations who proposed solutions to curb global temperatures from rising above 1.5 degrees Celsius. One can only imagine what robust reflections emerged from the mock negotiations that took place. Those who attended that workshop said it was wonderful. Such role playing at yesterday's workshop shows the power of a fruitful coming together of theater and politics. It reminds me of workshops from conferences of the past years when we always tapped the artists, the poets, the painters, and playwrights to use art in ecological education. Today, for our opening keynote this morning, we look to two artists yet again. Today's theme is looking forward, and our first keynote will be delivered by two speakers, Andrew Freebent and Adrian Yannick, both of the Artists Literacies Institute and the Turn It Around project. This will be followed by another keynote, this time focused on the youth and life education from no less than Professor Emeritus Michael Tan of the University of the Philippines, Diliman. We will close the morning plenary with a panel discussion on strategies toward more sustainable behavior in the new normal, participated in by Ms. Jenica Dizon of Waves for Water, Rodney Galicia of Living Laudato Si in the Philippines, and Maxine Mo of the National University of Singapore. In the afternoon, we will have the parallel sessions. There will be another round of paper presentations on best practices in ecological education, continuing from yesterday. And there's a breakout session on the intersection of ecological education and eco-spirituality. Finally, a Turn It Around workshop on the power of art to transform our planet will also be conducted by our keynote speakers. We started this conference with a keynote on Encanto, on spirits, and we will end with paper presentations and artistic performance that draw from our spiritual core. Let us have a spirited discussion this morning, shall we? And that's the recap for yesterday and an overview of today. And with that, I now introduce with great excitement our keynote speakers for this morning. I'll start with Andrew Freeben, an artist, educator, producer, and research artist whose praxis sits among the many intersections of art, education, media, film, journalism, literature, social impact, international development, research, and strategic design. He had worked for over 20 years as a multimedia artist and writer and publisher and art educator and producer of award-winning documentary films. After years of mobilizing artists to engage in their historical moment in ways beyond activism or advocacy, he funded the Artists Literacies Institute in 2018 to serve as a supplement to the education of citizen artists. This institute seeks to discover new, more meaningful roles for artists in their society and communities that go beyond communications. His creative practice consists of field building around artists as researchers. And as the Artist Literacies Institute, he's convened professional development courses for artists in systems thinking, worked as a strategic designer for fine artists with social change ambitions, consulted and convened an interdisciplinary research with Cornell University and the United Nations, and produced art-based civic interventions on a national and a global scale, including the democratic field with New York University's Verbatim Performance Lab, the Artist's Grief Deck with the NYC voluntary organizations active in disaster, and the Turn It Around Climate Education Project with UNESCO and the Open Society Foundations, which we will experience a bit in the workshop later. He's joined by Adrian Yannick, an artist, educator, and end-of-life doula who resides in the high desert of California. Her computer and media art spans several decades, including pioneering work in interactive cinema and live telematic performance. There are so many things that she has done, but recently, her creative practice focused on issues related to the US desert, environmental resilience, military testing and training, and indigenous values. Her ongoing series of data humanization performances recast endurance work for our time. Dry Lab 2023, which she did with co-director Marco Janssen and 8 participants imagined a near future of water scarcity that was enacted over 30 days in an experiment in extreme experiential learning. She can often be found in a public space offering climate future readings with her Echo Tarot deck. This recent work has been screened in film festivals in Spain, Australia, and the UK, and presented in Finland, Chile, Spain, and throughout the US. She's also a singer, songwriter, and published poet. It's a joy to have our two guests this morning. You have the floor. Welcome, Andrew and Adrian. Let's all give them a big warm round of applause. You have the floor.
Thank you so much for that warm introduction and the recap. And it feels like such a good community to be a part of. Greetings from New York City. As you can see, it's a bit dark here, but I'm very happy to be a part of this conversation. I'm so glad that Adrian and I received the invitation. And we're very happy to share the Turn It Around project with you. We're here, there's a lot to talk about with this project, but what we're here to talk about you'll learn a bit more about this project during the workshop with Sarah Derira later today. So we're here to give it a brief introduction and to talk a little bit about what we know of the mechanism of art as a means of culture shift, social change, paradigm shift. And how Turn It Around, how we've leveraged art and the ways of knowing that artists have to build a toolkit that we hope can help others do the same thing. So this is the introduction. If we look at the next slide, I don't think am I in control? I'm not in control. There we go. So this is the Turn It Around flashcards for education futures. And as you can see, they are 4 by 5 inch cardstock flashcards with artwork on one side, and we'll see in a moment writing on the other. But the concept here was that flashcards are typically something that are made by adults for youth. And we wanted to create a toolkit that turned that around. And so quite literally, youth have made the artwork, they have told the stories, they have done the writing, and they have defined frames in which this set can be used. And then they're shared with adults in policymaking spaces, decision-making, and hopefully to create new ways of seeing our relationship to the planet. So the next slide, please.
Sorry, Andrew, would you prefer to share your own screen so you can control it?
It's I'm happy with this if it's no trouble. This is okay. I'll just say next.
All right.
It'll save us time, I think, in the long run.
Oh, let me double check though. Is this 28 slides that you have? I think you gave a new one. Is this the correct one?
Oh, those aren't, they're not quite in the right order. No, so maybe I should share mine.
I'm sorry about this, and thank you so much.
Okay. I don't mind. So let's see if I share. Okay. Apologies for that. I wasn't sure if that link was going to be live, so here we go. Okay.
Yeah, just double checking. Yeah.
Yeah, here we go. So this is mine. Okay. All right. So just to confirm, can everyone now see? Does that look right? You see the first slide?
Yes, it looks good. Yeah.
Great. Okay. Here we are. Here's where I was. I was talking about relationships, and I show this slide to get an entryway into our understanding of why art and artists' ways of knowing are important in this moment, because scientists have told us what we need to know. And the problem is not that we don't know what's happening. The problem is in our relationships to one another and our relationships to the planet around us. And that is what we understand artists to do. I ask this question when I give a presentation. It seems like a very simple and innocuous question, but it's very difficult to really answer. And this has to do with the way that artists are educated and the way that we as a society are educated about what artists do. I will ask this same question when I'm speaking to scientists, and I say, well, what do scientists do? And it's fairly easy. Well, we research, we learn, we study. When I ask this, people might say, well, do we make art? Is that what artists do? But in truth, artists do much more. And I think that some of the most important things that artists do and are undervalued and unrecognized is that we mediate relationships. Artists produce experiential knowledge and we generate shared culture. These are things we take so for granted that we sometimes fail to recognize how primal and fundamental this part of an artist's practice is. And so this first came to this kind of leverage of the mechanism of art first came to us when Adrian and I worked together on this project called the Artist's Grief Deck at the beginning of the pandemic, when, as you mentioned in the introduction, the New York City Voluntary Organizations Active in Disaster came to us and said that there is a communal grief crisis because people cannot come together and enact the traditions and rituals they're accustomed to. And so this is when we first started to kind of leverage a model that Adrian has worked in before in the kind of card-based toolkit, and built a toolkit for for grieving in isolation. So this led us to a collaboration with Yvette Solova and a team of educators and sustainability scientists at ASU, Arizona State University, where Adrian also teaches. And they said, well, we like the grief deck and the way that it leverages this mechanism of art. And we're looking at climate education. And so they brought us together with two key partners, UNESCO and Open Society Foundations, that said, we want you to do something like the grief deck, but build a toolkit for climate education. And that's how we opened this discussion about, well, what will the Turn It Around cards look like? We didn't have the name yet. The name was actually quite a conversation. It took us quite a long while to get to that point, to understand that what we wanted to do was to create something that would give youth a voice, leverage the mechanism of art, the mediating power of art, and be a useful toolkit in lots of different environments where people can remediate their relationships to nature and the planet. And so the mechanism we landed on was that we were going to, again, work with artists who were going to submit original artworks. And I'll describe how we went about getting those artists, finding those artists in a moment. But we then came up with 7 written prompts. Rather than asking artists or writers and youth leaders to just come up with something out of the blue, we wanted to structure it like flashcards do. Like it might be parts of speech, or it might be different kinds of arithmetic. So on the front, you have a prompt, a question that's being asked. And there are 7 of these, such as, let other youth know where you find hope and resilience as you face an uncertain future. What excites you about the future? And we solicited responses to this question from youth leaders all around the world, and then we included their answers on the back side of these cards. And so you can see a sample here of how that looks. This is the 2 sides of the cards. And then the artist and writer and where they came from is very important, that we let everyone know, at what age these folks are and where in the world they're writing from. So we have a really wonderful, diverse collection of artists and writers. And I think I'm going to hand it to Adrian here for a moment to talk about that mechanism of art a little bit. And she'll take us through a few of the images that we collected during the open call.
Thank you, Andrew, and thank you to everyone for being here and for the invitation to present. So I just wanted to say a few things about why art. Andrew talked about what artists do, but what does art do? And it sounds like from your talks yesterday that many of you are already familiar with the power of art and its connection to inner worlds. But I just wanted to mention a few things. I mean, one thing, and especially why art can be useful in the classroom, even a classroom that's not an art classroom. Art can bring perspective. There's a space where you can really step back from something and consider it anew. It can be a process of remediating our relationship to nature, to the world. to have to picture it, to externalize our feelings, and there's a release involved there. So that piece of that perspective is very important place that art can play in that. Of course, thinking symbolically and metaphorically, literally freeing our minds from the literal world, activating our imaginations. That's a very important part of art, to just shift something and see it in a new way. Of course, that mind-body connection is very important. Just the act of kind of doodling or moving, being embodied, is quite important. Educators have found, I'm sure many of you have also already experienced that and understand that. And again, that connection to symbiotic understanding and contextual knowledge, so important. And Melissa Nelson, in her text, Education for the Eighth Fire, Indigeneity and the Native Ways of Learning, speaks about this proprioceptive quality of education and learning, where we're really calling upon the whole body, all the senses, and art is a way that we can access those things. Certainly also synthesizing knowledge. So bringing together knowledge from different disciplines is also very important. Areas of learning that can seem very disparate, instead of just analyzing or critiquing them, in art many times we're bringing them together, bringing research from different areas together. And then finally, this accessing inner worlds, so important. The idea that we need to touch, our inner worlds. This is an area that's neglected within sustainability and sustainability science. As Andrew mentioned, we're lots of science, lots of information going about, but we know that the way to change behaviors, to actually change, our values, is by accessing our inner worlds. That this is like an utilized leverage point. And again, this idea of endogenous learning, of learning what's already inside, being able to touch that, and how profound that can be. So you can go to the next slide, Andrew. Thank you. So this is, in addition to the cards as a toolkit, we also have all of the cards and their text available for free online. And anyone can just access it. And we're also in the process of working with educators to develop lesson plans that can be shared. And hopefully some of you might even be involved in that. And so this is just to give you an example. One of the prompts that was very important to us was a mandala prompt. And so we asked, one of the image prompts that we sent out was, create a mandala or a medicine wheel from a natural or refuse materials drawn from where you live. And so students, young people going out into their area, looking at what they're doing and reframing that, remediating that, working with that in a new way. So here you see artwork by Armi Haldar, who is 9 years old, New Jersey. And we also have the text that's from Aishal Tripathi, who's 14, from Uttar Pradesh in India. You can go to the next slide. So another mandala creation by Nivedita Air at 20 from Karnataka. I should mention that we in this project, when we were publishing where the students were from, we just let them name how they wanted to be represented, how they wanted where they were from. So some people noted regions, some people noted countries, some people noted their local area, and that's reflected in it. So, and in this case, the text is actually from Rutvi Mahendra from Uttar Pradesh, India, and she was 16 years old. You can go to the next. And another mandala that was created by Yana Supra, 13, from New Delhi, India. And talking about, one of the prompts was actually asking, where do you find hope in this world? Because we know so many young people are, and many of us are dealing with ecological grief, but that's an essential state. And so we wanted to ask, where are you finding hope? And so that generated some of these other texts and prompts. You can go to the next slide. So another area that we got quite a few submissions was in the area of collages. And here's an incredible collage that's all made of recycled refuse materials. So it was all things that that Ashley Hawking, 19 from Pennsylvania, gathered around their home, all kinds of trash, and then reordered it, reframed it, painted it, and created this very beautiful image. And then the text is also by Ashley. And I'm not sure if you have time to read that. But again, you can access all of these on our website. So go ahead and you can move forward. And then here's a really incredible, I love collages because also for students that are maybe not so great with art, they can easily move around, looking at, taking from images that they find elsewhere, again, reordering them, thinking them through in a different way. And this is a really important message. Capitalism is incompatible with the planet's biological processes. Yeah. So really beautiful card, and I like the capitalism blowing up. But anyway, and this comes from Mexico City, and with the text from a 15-year-old in Peru, Sahori Dayani Silvigil. And go ahead and go to the final slide for me. Yeah, and so here's a very, very beautiful piece from a film that then is drawn on by Florcita Mare in Buenos Aires, Argentina. And from nature, you can learn to feel the pulse of life in your being and your body. And so this was in response to a prompt that was included that's about what can we learn from nature that we can't learn in the classroom. And so, and one of the things is that we have an opening for all of the partners to be able to continue to submit within this project. And Andrew will talk about that more as he goes through. But now Andrew's going to talk more about the call, how that was taken about, and how we use social media to access this. So thank you, Andrew.
Thank you, Adrienne. Yeah, so the few minutes that I have left, you will in the workshop later with Sayarchana have the opportunity to make your own cards and also learn how to run a workshop so that you can make cards with students. And I will note that we have an open call right now for an edition of cards for the AUN EEC, the AUN EEC edition of Turn It Around. So we'll spend more time on the cards then, but we'll tell you a little bit about how we have the saying, how the sausage was made, the sort of ugly, behind the scenes part. We started with the prompts, and you can see these are the 7 prompts, and we had sample artwork from students of Adrienne's and other partners of ours that we just used to mock up early versions of what we thought the cards might look like so we could start to promote this online. And then we turned to some of our social media accounts and began posting. And again, so these are some of there's different iterations of very early open calls. In art, because it's image-based, Instagram tends to be a much more prominent platform than say Twitter or something that's more text-based. So we were leveraging Instagram quite a bit. And so these were built for Instagram. And you can see that they kind of increase in simplicity and boldness. When we first started, it's very easy to kind of overcomplicate a design, and we were still figuring this out as we went. And so it was from June to July, we had a very tight timeline to gather a lot of artwork from all around the world in order to curate a deck. Our goal was to have it ready for COP26. So this is from June to basically October. We had to have the artwork in, selected, curated, edited, designed, laid out, printed, and distributed in that time. There we go. So, a peek behind the scenes, as I was saying, we created an Instagram account, we created a website, we created a Twitter account, and we just started to, start shipping out these messages as quickly as we could. And we were using some of the, built-in promotional tools, but I wanted to just, I thought it would be interesting to quickly look at this so that you could see when you are building, when you are kind of customizing, your ads, your boosted posts, I guess they're called, we kept getting them rejected, as you can see in the middle. And this is because climate is political. And Instagram and Facebook and Meta, whatever it's called now, they think that it's political to talk about the climate online. And so they won't let you do paid ads unless you are a political entity, a registered political entity. So we actually had to navigate around this by being selective about which hashtags we're using. And then we were doing these custom audiences in which you can see you select different geographies and people's interests, because again, different geographies will have different restrictions. And so we had to learn quickly what the contours of those restrictions were so that we could get the message across, even while Meta didn't want us to talk about climate. And I can't emphasize enough how important a partners network is. So we weren't just doing this out in the cold. We were working hard, reaching out by phone, email, in person, to organizations and institutions that we thought were key partners. And those key partners leveraged their network and helped spread the word. And they provided us with expertise in the field, as well as, and in exchange, they came in and created their own card. And so we have partner cards in the deck as well. So without this network of partners with whom we're working, we're just out in the cold, doing something all by ourselves and no one's going to pay attention. But it was really the partners that created a sense of critical mass, created some energy and momentum behind the project. And these partners are still the ones that are helping get it out there and move it forward. And I put this in there because as we're talking about social media and we're talking about relationships, it's so important, I think, to emphasize that these are not relationships. When we use social media, we are using it to connect to people, but we are not using it to form a relationship with people. That is the mechanism of art, and that is a different process, which takes time. It takes introductions. It takes, building a relationship is not sending someone an email or getting a like on an Instagram post. There's a lot more to it. And so it was crucial that while we're leveraging social media and we're here to talk about the use of social media and the best ways to kind of navigate these corporate channels, is to recognize that getting people to just check boxes online is not getting them to engage in the situation. So I present this list to my classes when I'm talking about all the different ways that social media prevents us from engaging meaningfully in the world around us and remediating our relationships. So I have whole lectures on each of these subjects, but you might recognize things like performative activism, the sense that if you click a heart on a cause, that you have somehow contributed to that cause. And it satisfies some people that they've done enough when they do that. We have to work harder than that. We have to prevent that sense of accomplishment from feeling like you've engaged and you've done enough. So how can we use social media to actually make the next step to create relationships that aren't taxonomical, divisive, one-dimensional, create a sense of carelessness, right? We're scrolling through our feeds. We care less and less about each thing. We want people to care more and more. Social media is individualizing. It separates us and makes us think that we are solely responsible for all the crises in the world. The individualizing of the climate crisis, the idea that if I just recycle by myself, I'm doing enough, it creates a huge emotional burden on people of stress and anxiety that that we aren't doing enough. When in fact, it's not an individualist problem; it's a collective problem. So burnout, narrative collapse, profits over people, all of these things are the pitfalls of using social media. This is what relationships look like. So how can we get from posts online to this? That's our problem and that's our puzzle. And that's what we think that the mechanisms of art and the workshops, it's the reason we built a toolkit was because we wanted to activate workshops. We wanted to activate gatherings. We wanted to learn from nature. We want to learn from each other, which, I brought this card in there because this is exactly kind of the idea of the turn it around cards, is to look to nature and remediate our relationships. And so we did make it. The cards were ready in time for COP. And we were thrilled to send a team of youth activists and leaders from the Turn It Around team. And Sayarchana is in that picture to the right, kind of in the back on the left. You'll meet her later. And it's been hugely important, though, even though, you know, Adrian and I are, well, more or less grown-ups. I mean, we are artists, so it's kind of hard to, you know, feel grown up all the time. This is a project that is meant to be carried forward by youth. It was created by youth. You know, it might have been ideated by adults, but it was really about building a toolkit. And I would say Sayarchana and the youth that helped us make this toolkit are the ones now who are carrying it forward. And we're happy that it is really led by youth ambassadors. And Saya is going to be giving the workshop on it. You know, so we're here to talk about how the thing was born. But from here, we're happy to pass it on to the young people who are going to be doing the leading from here on out. I believe, yeah, that's it. We have some references, and I want to close, and you can, so we'll share these slides, of course, so if you want to look at these and refer to these in the future. But I want to emphasize this, that submissions are now open for the AUN EEC edition of Turn It Around cards. So artwork and prompts can now be submitted through this link. Again, we'll share this link and make sure the conference, you can access this link. You can go to turnitaroundcards.org to access it as well. But this is for all the young people you know, your students, your kids, your friends' kids, your neighbors. Share it with young people. They don't have to be accomplished artists. Everyone starts out as an artist. Some people just lose the capacity to be an artist. So if they're young, they're artists and they're leaders. And we encourage you to, you know, send us some work and let us put it into this collection and build this toolkit for even more people to use. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much to both of you, Andrew and Adrian. The open forum, our format, you could type and chat in the chat box any comments or questions. I could read them for you. If you feel like speaking yourself, please send me a message and I can call on you and acknowledge you. Meanwhile, I did already receive a few questions, but before that, I'm going to ask a question myself first, if that's okay with you. One of my favorite lines by Oscar Wilde, I think, is that life reveals its latest secrets to the youth. So, of course, your project makes a lot of sense. I'm just wondering personally from the two of you, do you have a favorite insight you learned from the art that shocked you or surprised you? What learning stands out to you? Because you are very seasoned people in this line of work, you know, talking decades. Was there anything else? Was there anything that the youth did that touched you and, you know, moved you? And can you share a little bit about those things that engaged you from the work that the youth did? I'll start with, I know that's probably asking a parent to name a favorite child. How about you? Who do we want to start with? Andrew?
Sure. Why not? Well, I did close on that one card that that has the leaf, you know, the heart-shaped leaf with the holes in it. I mean, you know, I would say that the thing that, I don't know if it surprised me, but it resonated, and I've tried to hold on to it, is that one of the challenges in a lot of kind of art-based projects and art and activism is that sometimes it's very like feel good. It's very just trying to be positive. And I think that you know, I'm really glad Adrian showed the, you know, the capitalism is incompatible with the planet card, because a lot of what we saw was youth holding on simultaneously to anger and hope. And we have every right to be angry. And I think, you know, in the condition of the planet in which this generation has received it, there's a lot of anger in this work, and but it's fuel for hope. And I think that's an important piece to hang on to, is that this is not just a nice looking, you know, like everything's going to be okay, kind of feel good project. But it is possible to have both of those experiences at the same time.
How about you, Adrian?
Yeah, well, one of the things that really, really touched me was the breadth of responses that we got. As Andrew mentioned, we had such a short time period. We weren't sure what kind of response we would get, and there was literally from just about every continent and from age. I think the youngest we had was age 5 or 6. To we cut off youth at 30, but just the range, the depth, the range of types of work that we got. We didn't. It was very touching. It was very moving, and we curated a small amount in the deck, and then we're able to translate those as well. There's a Spanish and Portuguese translation and other translations that we're planning. But we had many hundreds more images that were actually then images and texts that were then analyzed by our group. Dr. Iveta Silova and her group did an analysis overall and published a report as well about everything that the youth had to say and the imagery that came in. And actually, I can put that link in the chat because the published report as well is quite beautiful, and that was part of the motivation of the deck as well. Was Dr. Silova noticed that she was at the table at all these Future of Education meetings, and there weren't any young people at the table, and so she partnered with us. So what's a way that we can really attract and get young people's voices here to be part of these conversations, really present. And I think the other thing I'll just mention is that one of the things that definitely touched me was all the ways that people thought of. One of the prompts was what you've learned from your ancestors, and that was really very beautiful. So.
Yeah, what you shared on screen, the 16-year-old who wrote about, processions that you have, that is, enough. It's really touched me also. Now, a lot of questions that are coming in are more about the how you did it. But before I go to the how, I still have a question about asking for the secret sauce, the recipe. There are so many calls for participating in things like this. And there's something you did. Andrew said it's because of the collaborators and all that, but I suspect it's really more than who you partnered. There must be something in what you did that resonated. And I don't know if you can put into words what that is, but we can sense that this is bigger, this is deeper, this is not your usual. I sense something special about what you're talking about. And I need to ask about the secret sauce. But do you have an idea what part of it in the recipe gave it the depth of flavor that it has? Because nearly all of us probably in this room has either heard of or done a call for contributions at some point. I know that's not an easy question, but
well, thank you. Oh, go ahead, Andrew.
No, Adrian, go for it.
I think Sayarchana is our secret sauce. So, and Sayarchana and the other young people that were working on the project, they completely took it on. They completely got excited, and they completely dedicated a tremendous amount of time into posting. Sayarchana was doing live streams, bringing in other people. Actually, we didn't mention that our assistant producers brought in young people to review everything then, and we paid them. And so the extent to which they really just took control of the project, and that we were ready to hand it over and to really just help guide them. And I think their urgency and the desire to connect with one another and really to turn things around really came through. So Andrew, anything to add?
No, well, I think that is hugely important. I mean, you can't underestimate. It's not about putting one post up and then throwing some money at it. It really is about you put one post up and then Saya will share it, to 20 different people and then do a video about it and then tweet about, it's constant engagement. It really is just constantly pushing that out and having the energy and knowing those channels. And then I think our role was, we tried to make sure that we created an artful and cohesive project. So there are designers involved in the posts and the style of the cards. A visual cohesion is really important, and involving artists. I think making an artful call was important. And it's hugely important because oftentimes these calls are just asking artists to do work for free. And from the outset, we make sure that artists are being paid. And so artists that got selected for this edition, and artists who will get selected for the AUN edition will receive an artist honorarium. So this is, like recognizing, maybe not to the full extent that we would like, but it is at least recognizing the labor value of artistic labor, rather.
Well, I did see that in one of your calls, there was a cash reward. Did it work like a contest? Or I guess the question here is, how do you strike a balance between inviting volunteerism, which is one of the things that are enchanting about this field, is that people they give without counting the cost. And here you are talking about properly and respectfully, giving people something for the work that they put in. But that's a tricky balance, doesn't it? We can critique capitalism, but still also play by its rules in the way we craft our projects. So how do you walk that tightrope?
I think it's just working here in the United States, where the levels of inequality are stark, and artists are often, asked to work for free. So I'm familiar with this idea that when people are working for love, they will continue working, but they will also burn out, because we do live under capitalism, right? And we do have to pay rent, and we do have to buy food, and we do have to take care of our families and buy medicine. So that love only goes so far, and that passion only goes so far. So we do have to strike a balance. And so it's a matter of, I think, when we come up with a project, we make a budget, and we all make budgets. And it's what you put at the top of that budget. What the first thing in that budget is sort of marks the spirit of the project. And the first line in our budget is the artists. This project isn't going anywhere without them. And so they're the first people we are thinking about. And then everything comes after that.
So when you turn the reins over to the young people to run this project and have creative control and whatnot, the necessary funding support will be coming from your end?
Yeah.
Yeah. This does not sound like an enchanting conversation at the moment.
That's the reality.
But now let me read some of the questions, more of the how to enjoy, and what's wonderful is you're providing it for free, right? And that means the world can access this treasure trove that you came up with. Are the cards commercially available is the question, actually. Are they for free? Or are printable versions of the cards available for free? How does that work? I mean, that's the question. Are they commercially available, or are the printable versions available for free? That's one of the questions I received.
I think we think of it as being open source. So we have published, printed editions that you can buy through the website. And if you are part of an organization or a school, you get a discount code to make sure that it's accessible. But there are individuals that just want to buy a copy to have a copy, and we will let that happen. And that does help us. But at the same time, the whole resource and then some is available online for free. And we have no problem with people printing them and making a hard copy of it, a paper copy of it for their classroom as needed. So most of the printed copies that we have are distributed as handouts, giveaways at conferences and at gatherings and meetings. But at the same time, we keep a few around in case you want to order one.
How difficult was it to curate select and probably, disqualify some of the artwork. What was your selection criteria? I'm sure there's aesthetics to it, and that's part of the secret sauce. But were there also other criteria you considered? Probably, diversity, or please let us share how that process was. I imagine with all the volume you received, it must have been a painful exercise.
Well, thankfully, because of the experience we had with the artist grief deck, we had some systems in place. And in fact, that's one of the reasons why we used that as a model, because we knew it was a quick turnaround project. We had some templates for something that had worked. And so we had worked out some of those processes beforehand, including a spreadsheet that we were able to create, that Andrew was able to create from all the submissions that we could then distribute to a number of reviewers. I mentioned that we had young reviewers.
Oh.
And so Sayarchana and another assistant producer had tapped a series of, I guess there was 8 different reviewers, and they went through and we had a kind of ranking schema. And then we went from that and looked at which ones rose kind of to the top. And from there, we started to work with certainly looking at diversity of region, diversity of age, diversity of topics, all of those things. And then, and we had many iterations until we got to the final group.
And reviewers were also youth.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
All the reviewers were young people. Yeah.
Do you have any remarkable or notable reactions from the older generation? Do you have, because there seems to be a lot of intergenerational, that's what turned it around, like the reversing the flow of power and knowledge and ideas and wisdom. Do you have any to share some remarkable reactions from older people who've seen the artwork?
I mean, I actually wonder if Sayarchana would have a good answer to that.
Is
she's
she-
on the front line. We're in the background here.
Yeah.
Sayarchana is really out there deploying, like
Okay.
the youth ambassadors are really out there deploying the cards. And I think, I think we're kind of kind of in the back now.
Yeah, I was so shocked with that 6-year-old mandala. It resonated with me, and I'm going to read a comment here, which I felt leads to how I asked about the secret sauce. Anna Makatangay from Capital University said that changing values requires accessing inner worlds. And that part of your presentation really resonated with her, along with so many other points that art should have a space in all classrooms. And she's thanking you so much for all that you shared. That's what I felt your project did. It resonates. And it engages the inner world because probably it's run by artists, done by artists, and believes in everyone's inner artist. And so that's why the children passing their artwork, with or without training, that doesn't matter, right? You said everybody's an artist, so this is really everyone's. More questions, sorry. We have room for 2 more. Let me know if, please type in the chat box. But now it's a social media question. Can you talk more about the filtering of hashtags and the posts that you experience from social media and or YouTube? The filtering of hashtags and posts.
Yeah, sure. So in case you aren't familiar, a hashtag, is this little symbol, and it actually comes from computer programming. So that little symbol turns off the computer reading a program. So it's a way that programmers would make notes so that they could skip to a section of code. And so now what it does is it skips people through sections of social media. So you put a hashtag word and you can filter the whole internet and just find that hashtag. So what it is a taxonomy of our culture. I don't look at this as necessarily a good thing. Because it can be used, it collapses all of the complexity and nuance of being a human being down to just like, search for one word. And so when we're trying to, get things to rise to the top of people's searches, we're trying to use the keywords that they might be using. And so it forces you to think about, well, what are we working on? What are we writing about? And things like climate and environment and education are sort of obvious, but also really big general keywords. And then, as I said, because the hashtag format of culture is so vulnerable to misuse, that hackers have been known to just flood the internet with a certain hashtag and then steer the conversation around a topic in unpleasant directions, unwanted directions. So you can really hijack hashtag culture in problematic ways. And that is the kind of thing that the social media companies are, I think, trying to prevent, a problem of their own creation when they tell us that we can't, for example, use hashtag climate in a paid post, or climate change, rather. So they're not denying climate change, but they are saying, well, we don't want to talk about it. And we don't want you to promote any work, that uses it. So that's where you have to get creative, and recognize that, well, what are the other kinds of terms that people might be looking for? How can we get our posts into their feed, but not trigger the sort of censor bots? And it's really about trial and error, recognizing that there are no human beings who are filtering these things. It's all just robots. So we just have to keep talking and sending out different lists of words until the robots let one pass. And then we copy paste that list of hashtags, because that is, that's our green light.
Okay, thank you very much. That is very looking forward and fighting the fight in today's context. We don't have time anymore, unfortunately, for more questions, but don't worry, we still have a workshop later, so we have more chances of getting deeper into this topic. Thank you very much to our first keynote speakers for today, Andrew and Adrian. Let's give them a big round of applause. And now I will introduce our next keynote speaker. Dr. Michael Tan, professor and former chancellor of the University of the Philippines, Diliman, is a medical anthropologist. He has worked with many community-based health programs since 1975, and he has been an university educator and administrator since 1984. He also teaches in the Ateneo Graduate School of Business, MBA Health, where he handles a course called Health, Culture, and Society, emphasizing the development of cultural competence. He is Professor Emeritus, and he continues to teach at UP Diliman, at UP Manila, and at UP Los Baños. In 2021, he was appointed president of Guam Wing College, a nonprofit school dedicated to the human sciences. All the students are scholars from low-income families. At Guangming College, he has introduced innovative courses for undergraduates around gender and sexuality related to self-care, community care, and the climate emergency. He believes in reaching out to the public to raise science awareness, which he does through a weekly column, Pinoy Kasi, in the Philippine Daily Inquirer, and through webinars and lectures. Dr. Tan was elected to the National Academy of Science and Technology in 2012, which is the highest science advisory body in the country. What a special morning with artists and the scientists. Ladies and gentlemen, let's give a warm round of applause for Professor Emeritus Michael Tan. Good morning.
Good morning to everyone. I nearly missed the, thank you for the introduction, and I did catch the previous session. I wish I'd come in earlier, but I presume that these will all be posted. There's much to learn from the different presentations. They're very exciting. Am I right? Will it be posted?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Okay, there are all these things that we have to click on, right? I'm going to try to share screen now. I'm using a very old computer and it's been acting up, but let's hope it, and old dogs do learn. I'm a veterinarian, so here we are, slideshow. No. How much time do I have? 20 minutes?
Yes,
Okay. Sige. So
and,
can you,
and we can see your PowerPoint.
someone wants to, okay, is the PowerPoint okay? Yeah.
Yes, it's visible.
We used to have photo bombers, now we have Zoom bombers. No, that's my emotional support dog. No? Okay, pasensya na lang. I will try to manage. I wanted to start out referring to the global climate emergency, a term that's been used for several years now. And yet you rarely hear the term being used in the Philippines. We're still talking about climate change, global warming. I think it's a good place to start and to popularize the term climate emergency and to point out that some 19 national governments have passed statements about the global climate emergency. The Philippines is not one of them, but we've had local governments that have passed similar declarations. These are Bacolod, Cebu, Makati, Quezon City, and Tolosa. I still hope that we will have more jurisdictions and maybe eventually the national government itself declaring. And in contrast, I'm sorry, I'm really so distracted. Just a minute.
It's a good thing the audience has a lot of animal lovers for sure. And that's part of the natural ambience.
Oh no. Okay.
Don't worry, it's okay.
It's not too, I don't know what's going on. She's usually very behaved. No? Okay. In contrast to our lack of action on declaring a global climate emergency, look at, if you Google in the Philippines for climate emergency, the first item that comes out is this link to an article that came out recently in the Manila Times, echoing a small fringe group of scientists who say there is no climate emergency, that the climate warming is a natural occurrence and all. And this really highlights the problems we have. There is just so little being said in terms of accurate public education on the climate emergency. And I think we have to take action. We have to double time in here, triple time, and get it going. And of course, public education is a key, and it must include countering the misinformation and disinformation. I don't want to dignify that group of scientists, supposedly, which included one Filipino, that is spreading so much misinformation, and they're part of these right-wing conspiracy groups in the United States. I hope they do not gain currency, but we better work fast, or else they will become, just like during COVID, like the anti-vaxxers, become a dominant voice. Of course, schools are very important for climate education, all the more so in the Philippine case because we have such low science literacy. And I refer to both natural and social sciences. And that makes us more vulnerable to disinformation. I did want to use the term human sciences rather than just science, rather than just the natural sciences or the social sciences, because I think human science is more wide in its coverage and does include the arts and humanities. And I think this workshop that we're having is showing that we cannot untangle arts and humanities from the sciences. I wanted to start off also, I come from the area, from public health, and I also work in reproductive health for many years. And I wanted to say, as we go into ecological education, climate education, some things to avoid. I'm saying this lightheartedly, we should learn from the fiascos of sex education. Some of the things I'm going to mention here should be familiar to you. First, let's not create new compulsory cases like we did with family planning. I'd hate to see a compulsory course in climate education. I'll give you my alternative in a while. Let's not make the mistake of limiting climate education to the technical aspects full of technical jargon. Let's avoid scare tactics. You know, it's almost like the Armageddon, that the end of the world is near. Let's avoid moralistic messages, even if there is a lot of moralism that needs to come in climate education. And let's avoid weak and unrealistic solutions. We had that in sex education. For the climate emergency, I've seen how how the little that we're doing ends up with beautification campaigns. It actually happened in the school that I'm handling right now, and which is what spurred me to think of a more comprehensive approach. What I'm advocating is niche curricular planning. Let's look for appropriate courses where ecological education can be introduced with proper context. So there are our curricula from basic education to tertiary education, they're packed. There are just too many subjects. And I worry that there are people who would like to take away some of the subjects, and that's going to, and just go straight into technological and vocational training. So we have to look at what's available and find ways to integrate climate planning. Just as an example, I am an anthropologist, and we have biological anthro courses, which traditionally emphasize physical anthropology and osteology, buto-buto nga, to discuss human evolution. And while those are important, I am now redirecting our courses towards real biological anthro, which should include a comprehensive course, comprehensive classes or lectures on ecosystems, biodiversity, and sustainability, and with climate emergency as an overarching concern. And we are doing that right now. Another example would be I just finished a class right now. I'm on back-to-back today. I'm part of the team at the UP College of Veterinary Medicine. We have a subject called animal welfare, which is required of all vet students, but it's an elective for many other courses. And we had students from forestry, from agricultural business, and all. It's a very popular course. And in the past, it was animal welfare in a very narrow sense. But today, I mean, in the last 3 years, we've included, I handle a module which includes lectures on how the climate emergency aggravates certain problems, the human encroachment into wildlife habitats, the creation of what are called peri-domestic animals, those that live in close contact with humans, even becoming semi-domesticated, for instance, wild pigs, wild chickens. And the problems there that come would include potentially pathogenic mutations as animals, as the pathogens jump species and end up in humans. We call these zoonotic spillovers. And this is something that vet students were not getting, and now we're including it in here. And it is an example of how niche planning, where the climate emergency is then tied to something like animal welfare, which is real to the vet students. In so many words, what we've done is to extend animal welfare to something broader, which is called One Health, which is endorsed by several international bodies. And it talks about linking the health of humans to the health of animals, all in the context of the health of ecosystems. I think you can imagine where we're headed for. I am Professor Emeritus in UP, and I continue to teach there. Such late drivers. I have a 9-unit load there. But I also run a small college called Kwangming College in Tagaytay. It's supported by Taiwanese Buddhists, but all the students are Filipino and none are Buddhists. I wanted to clarify that because people keep saying, what are you doing in a Buddhist school? They have been very generous. All students come from households with incomes less than 180,000 per annum, with very little exposure to the natural and social sciences. None of them pay tuition fees, which is why I agreed to handle this college. I'm giving you the background there so you can see how we are conducting ecological education in such a setting. Starting last year, started a course called Climate Justice and Social Inequity, and it was taught as a life education class. Students have to take 4 of these life education classes to graduate. And I said, let's have one devoted to climate justice and social inequity. I was fortunate to be able to get resource persons from UP Diliman, from Likaan, a women's NGO, and the Institute for Climate and Sustainable Cities. And these are key concepts, and they're here to show you the flow of the course. We start out with ecology in the sense of good health. Ecology is really good health, from our bodies to the health of the planet. We talk about ecosystems and biomes. We talk about biodiversity, sustainability, and One Health. And this is so basic and yet is so new to our students. But they enjoy it thoroughly because we have good lectures, and also because it relates to their own lives. Many come from rural areas, and it's very real for them. Then we move on to the environmental problems, which we project as ill health. We talk about evolution, we talk about the latest kid on the block, that's human beings, Homo sapiens, and how we entered and have created anthropogenic climate emergency. We explain greenhouse gas emissions and carbon footprints, the very, very basic concepts again, from which we can then understand the climate emergency. Remember, this is a whole semester. And then we go into climate justice options at the personal level, family, community. We talk about production to consumption. We talk about diets, talk about mobility, all the little things we can do to reduce our carbon footprints. And then we talk about creative resistance, more on that later, and community projects that can be implemented through a national service training program. That, in a nutshell, is what we do. The pedagogies are important. All lectures were online. They are face-to-face starting this school year. They draw from the students' own situations and their own perceptions of issues. The emphasis is on the Philippines, but we always relate it to global events. We draw from Freire, Paulo Freire, and I know you're all young and you probably never heard of him. He's a Brazilian educator who influenced many community educators like myself. So the emphasis is on consciousness raising, on decoding realities. The idea is that people themselves should be able to decode, to deconstruct what is happening around them, and to challenge the myths around, for example, climate emergency. It is more than critical education. If you look at the K-12 program, you're supposed to have critical education in K-12. Once they reach college, we aim for higher order thinking that includes synthesis and discernment. And I can't think of anything more powerful than having climate justice as a way to talk about synthesis and discernment. And that I would like to push very hard. We have to teach the kids and ourselves how to identify greenwashing, because there is so much of that going on right now. Big companies are riding on the climate emergency, and sometimes in ways that are so very harmful. And young people start to think that what they're doing is the correct way to solve the problem. We have looked into research as important as well, small research projects. But the caveat here is that it was actually a small research project we did in early 2021, focusing on plastics, that stimulated us to go further. Because what happened is the students gathered many examples of problems associated with plastics. And then in the end, we said, what are you going to do now? So they proposed, what did they come up with? Beautification campaigns, more of anti-littering efforts. And again, we said that's fine. They had recycling, which was fine as well. But a lot of it was very piecemeal and it did not go very far. I love the soft drink containers being made into flower pots. But I said, we should be asking ourselves, why are we drinking so much of these carbonated beverages? There is no connection that was made in there until, of course, we had the bigger course. There were no proposals to tackle environmental education. And that's why we went into the climate justice course. I want to mention, we move away from Quang Minh at UP Diliman, where I continue to teach. We have a project on embodied ecology. This is with the University of Wageningen in the Netherlands. Last summer, we had students fielded in La Trinidad in Benguet to look at vegetable and flower farms to understand the ecological context of their livelihoods, and local perceptions of risks and benefits. Embodied ecology is asking people, how do you evaluate your environment using your own senses? So really what we're doing is trying to get into people to what they sense, using their own bodies, and making sense visually, auditory-wise, olfactory, tactile, and gustatory. Very interesting results in here. It made it so much more real for the communities as well as for the students. This semester, we're extending this. We are involving the Benguet State University, all our college students. and they will do the sensory projects as well. But we're also going to be testing wearable technology developed at the Institute of Chemistry in Diliman, which will correlate their body perceptions with what's happening in the environment. They're very simple gadgets. No? They're not expensive. They have sensors there, and they have GPS. So then in the end, the students learn how to follow the change. Where were the peak points of air pollution, and why might they have been happening? Because the ones who developed the program told us they were surprised with some of the findings. Like, one of the professors lived on the 23rd floor of a high-rise on Katipunan Avenue near the Ateneo, and he found that air quality was so bad up there. He had presumed that it was clean up there. It wasn't. Dirty air apparently still floats up. And this is very conscientizing for the students, for the teachers, and we hope that this can then be that we can reach policymakers to help them to see the realities of what people embody, their own perceptions of what is safe and unsafe. Words matter, of course, in the education, in these courses that we're doing. We are not using climate change or global warming anymore, because these have been co-opted by the denialists who say these are natural. We feel climate emergency emphasizes the urgency of the issue, and we feel climate justice addresses the power relations that we have to address, starting those within families and communities. Comparing utilities bills, for example. It's interesting that the Pakistani government is now using the word climate justice, saying that the developed countries should pay for the damage they have wrought, and which is affecting Pakistan right now. Even more importantly are the images. These are some of the screenshots we took from media, and which we are using in our classes. So you see the animals stranded up there. It's human interest. Animals are always human interest. The one on the right is striking. You would think these were refugees from war-torn areas, and turns out these are from Montalban, Rizal, during a flood. Of course, it was heartwarming seeing how animals were being rescued, but also heartbreaking that this had to happen. Always, we have alternative action for our students in Kwangming, the majority of whom are performing arts majors. We plugged them in. We had a guest lecturer from Canada who talked about creative resistance. This is rather cute. I pledge allegiance to the earth of our beloved solar system and to all of her creatures. For here they dwell, one planet, united in harmony with universal love and compassion for all. Little messages that count. Most importantly, all of these fall in the orbit of life education. The term, I think, is a good one to use. It does not have to be in the course title, but whatever the course that is used, we should refer to climate education as life skills education, taught with the perspective of a respect for all forms of life and action for planetary interconnectedness. We sometimes use the word planetary health. Our GMC experiences, I have to mention, also made us realize how our current rule by law, rather than of law, is seriously handicapping our efforts to work for climate justice. Because it's curious, when we did the creative resistance part, many of the students were actually dismayed. They said, how can you do things like that? Isn't it anti-government? I was really surprised. The creative resistance is very mild. It uses dramatization. But this is where we are. I stayed in UP for so many years, and I presumed that all students are that way. It turns out that you have students who are scared to death, even for an issue like climate justice. And we had to explain that the things that are being done are legal. Those are our rights, not to speak for the need, our right to a clean environment, our right to a better life. They are convinced now, of course, but that was a real eye-opener for me. And we should not forget that it's part of life education. They have to realize that when they go out there, if they don't speak up, they're going to be in real trouble. They'll be, you know what they will be. So creative action builds on stories and narratives. I'm referring to the work of the Institute for climate and sustainable cities. They produced 2 excellent books, AGAM, which are Filipino narratives on uncertainty and climate change, and Harvest Moon, which is an international anthology. What's important here is that when they were producing these 2 books, they sent photographs to writers and asked them to write about the crisis without mentioning climate change, adaptation, mitigation. Neoliberalism was another word they banned. No? And the challenge, of course, was to get people to listen to the narratives and to speak to our bodies, to people, and to communities. Here is the cover of Agam. Oh, I'm sorry about the picture on the right. This one example here, the picture on the right was actually sent to me. I was asked to write about it, and my story was malayo na, meaning it's now far. And this was about again, you were supposed to create a narrative. We had no idea where the picture was taken, what it was about, but when I got this picture, it reminded me of a couple I met in Palawan, and they were going to gather water, and they were saying malayo na. They have to go so much further now to get water. And we need to have more of these evocative pieces, photographs, illustrations, and get students to talk about, to weave out stories there, or for them to take pictures themselves, or to get people and communities to take pictures. Harvest Moon is the international production of this institute. And one of the poems there was from Marjorie Abasco. It was originally in Cebuano, translated into English. Because of the lack of time, I'm not going to read your poem. You're going to get this PowerPoint anyway. This is information on, if you need more information about Agam, which is now out of print, and Harvest Moon, which is still available. Going beyond fake news, misinformation, and disinformation, something that my greatest fear is that we, the older generation and young people today are beginning to think that what we see every year, the floods and all, are natural. That is what the denialists want to happen. And so in one of our lectures, I used this photograph and with this caption, taon-taon na lang ba ito? Are we just going through this every year? Are we accepting that this is natural, including the muddied waters, the flood waters? Leptospirosis is on the rise. If you look at it, we had more than 100 deaths so far this year. Again, the photograph is heartwarming, but it's also heartbreaking. Rescuing a kitten, this child deserves much more, and so does the nation and the planet. So our curricula and our pedagogies, especially for the climate emergency, must be works in progress. They change dynamically, not just every SEM, even from one class to another. The animal welfare subject that I teach is twice a week, and I find myself tweaking the slides sometimes halfway through while I'm talking about it. Students themselves contribute, and they become very lively discussions, contributing to the PowerPoint and the content changing each time. They have to be works in progress. They have to be as vibrant as the lives and life that we talk about. That's it. Oh,
yeah.
If you want more information, I'm using a Kwangming College address. You can write us at the observatory kwangmingcollege.edu.ph, and you may have to wait a while because of my 9-unit load and other stuff, but we will get to you. And of course, I'd be very interested in an exchange of materials. Maraming salamat sa inyong lahat.
Thank you very much for your presentation. And please don't worry about the dog. It was good timing that when you were talking about domestic animals,
yes.
bark. It's part of our natural soundscape. Now I have questions already coming in, but I hope you don't mind. But I also have questions of my own, if that's
Sure.
okay. I'm picking up from a quote that one of our participants liked from the previous presentation. I think it's Anna Makatangay of Capital University earlier said that from the first presentation, she liked how changing values requires accessing inner worlds. And that resonated with her, and that her that resonated with me as well. And I sensed in your presentation a dissatisfaction with some of the cosmetic solutions that students gave you about how to, fix things through beautification. It seems that they were not engaged at the level of their values, and that the logic that is needed, it became the surface. You also mentioned kasi na we shouldn't pontificate, that you're mentioning Freire and conscientization, which means engaging the value systems we have at a deeper level, but also we must be very careful that we don't moralize or we don't pontificate, which is one of your first slides. So there is really, again, a tightrope, just like in the morning that my question is there. How do you navigate and balance that tightrope of reaching inside, conscience part, how do you develop an ecological conscience without pontificating?
Something very important here, and I was going to insert in the slides, but forgot with all the things that had to be put in. The problems we see, we should not forget. No? I mean, yes, we'll tell people to access their inner worlds, which we're doing through embodied ecologies and all. But young people, where is that coming from? It's coming from the adults. So if they go into beautification campaigns, it is not because their inner world is limited to beautification, but because adults are telling them that's how we're going to solve it. And part of that, something that has been a pet peeve for me since the pandemic started, is this crazy emphasis on resilience. We keep saying that the Filipinos are resilient, but it's used to justify a lot of the injustices that are around. You see the little boy with the kitten, and people will actually say, tingnan mo mahirap. And I've heard it. Look at the poor. Aren't they resilient? Aren't they lovable? And I think that is such an insult to human dignity. I'm sorry, I'm pontificating a bit there. But it upsets me because I know, looking at that picture, that boy is standing barefoot in muddied waters, will probably pick up something in there. So I will not stand for people saying, look at that, that's resilience. In other lectures, I've used pictures of people drinking alcohol in the floods. And this has been used by foreign media to say the Filipino is so resilient. And no one talks about the floods. And no one talks also, remember when we talk about social inequity, you might have been wondering, why did we team up with Likhaan? Because one of the most problematic inequities we have is gender inequity, right? It's the women who suffer so much when there's a climate emergency. And that photograph, I should have included it in this presentation, of men. It was of men drinking in the floods. And I always show it and I ask people, what's wrong with this? And they don't catch the fact that it's all men who are drinking until about half an hour of discussions. And then they go, oo nga, ba't puro lalaki? I said, nasaan ang mga babae? Nagpo-problema sa bahay. Saan ba ako kukuha ng pera para sa serbesa nila?
Sir, in English for our...
I'm sorry. So the women are probably inside their homes saying, where am I going to get the money for these guys who are drinking out in the floods? And that's part of the climate education that we're trying to show people, that in addition to the problems itself, you create layers of myths, of resilience, for example, rather than attending to the doing something with people. Now, how to avoid pontification? Get people's narratives. That's what I wanted to say. Let them do the storytelling. And I'm sure, as we have seen in our colleges, that people are going to tell different stories that challenge your dominant discourse.
Okay, somebody sent a message anonymously, reacting to one of your early slides, which may not have been the topic of the presentation, but really was an important point. Creating new compulsory courses on climate education should not be. We should not create compulsory courses on climate education, was one of your points, and this person who sent the question agrees with that. And though it's not the focus of your thought, He wants to ask for your thoughts on where you think the obsession is coming from for requiring courses, at least in the Philippine education system. Before you answer his question, can I do a check of all our audience, especially those who are not from a Philippine setting, or even if you're in the Philippine setting? Are there any of you who work in institutions that have a compulsory course on the environment? Let's just let's check.
Good
Um,
question. Yeah.
Is
Yeah,
that,
I'm curious.
just to check, especially for our neighbors, just wondering if there have been institutionalized, you know, educate, a space dedicated officially. So I'm just checking the chat box. Can you write? There's no responses yet, but are there any of you who have a compulsory course in
Yeah.
your curriculum?
Maybe a simple yes, no?
Yeah, just a yes if there is, or maybe, sorry,
No
not,
one?
not yet. Maybe this is something that's probably being debated or advocated, but I can imagine. So Dr. Noor Hasharina Hassan says none, just on environment in general. So okay. Doreen also says not in my institution. It's sometimes a topic that's being discussed, but not yet compulsory. Okay, so maybe this is at the level of being advocated by certain people who are pushing for it. But Maxine Mo from Singapore says, yes, we now have a recent topic in science module that is now compulsory. And from YouTube, Dr. Ibita says, the problem of toxic positivity and abuse of, okay, that's about the resilience comment. All right. Okay, so can you share your thoughts on this compulsory courses, and maybe for others? No, we have the person says that's been done for sex education and reproductive health, as you had
Yeah.
pointed out.
It's
All
been
right.
done. It's been done for the Constitution. In fact, I think it might still be required. Things that are required tend to be, students don't like the subjects. They end up hating it, actually. Which is why I think it has to be smuggled into the other subjects. It can be in NSTP, it can be in the natural science. I'm not sure UP got rid of natural sciences in RGE curriculum. Would you believe that? So the niche that's available has disappeared. At one time, you could go through UP without ever taking math, for example. So that's what I meant, that the sciences have been, and of course the social sciences have always been taken lightly. And so the spaces where we can introduce climate science and climate justice are very narrow, but we have to look for those spaces, such as we did for life education, or in your own majors. In anthropology, I found it in biological anthro. In vet med, we found it in animal welfare. I teach in the medical schools, so we will have to figure out where we can introduce this. It will be a major topic, incidentally, in medical curricula eventually.
Am I correct in sensing in your suggestion a logic of unity where you integrate it with other things that we are talking about, rather than talking about it separately,
Yeah.
as if separate from all the other things? Because I think even your One Health operates on the logic of unity and seeing the connections among everything. Is that some form of mainstreaming? Can we
It's
think?
mainstreaming while
Well, niche.
it's mainstreaming, but especially because if you talk about climate justice, you will have to point out the inequities, and that is not always mainstreaming. You may have to find yourself looking at the margins again. I will still use the Filipino term here, the margins, and you know that in recent times it became a very popular term, sa laylayan ng lipunan.
Okay, yeah, at the
The
fringes
edges of society.
Yeah. In Ateneo de Zamboanga, Welma Omboy says, while the course is not compulsory in their institution, it's part of their environmental advocacy program and part of formation training session. topics.
Yes.
So the formation part, it's really in that forming the person, the values education as well. And yeah.
Mm-mm.
Any last thoughts that you would like to share with us, or maybe react to the problem of toxic positivity and the abuse of resilience from Dr. Marilu Evita? I think she shares your sentiments about, but I think I don't know if those are, you have thoughts on this.
Mm-mm. S- yeah, one thing I didn't put in there, which I think is important, COVID-19 should remind us about the emergency as well. The connection is not made. It's mainstream media, the schools are not aware. I just came from a conference, not a conference, it's a small meeting of national academicians from different countries in the region and from the United States. And the discussion was on something really technical, zoonotic spillovers. And this is, I think I did have passing mention, this is the problem of as humans encroach into spaces of wildlife, then you have a greater chance of wildlife diseases that mutate and that jump the species. They enter the human population and might develop into a public health problem and eventually into a pandemic. And COVID-19, we're pretty sure that it was a zoonotic spillover. And the question right now, not the question, but the assertion of scientists is that when you talk about the next pandemic, and I know we're still recovering from the current one, the next pandemic is not a matter of if, but a matter of when. And that sense of urgency is not there right now. And it has to be tied with a sense of urgency for the climate emergency. If that message can be put through without scare tactics, which we love in the Philippines. Remember, they sent tanks into Tondo and all of that. Unless we make that connection, we're not going to get enough people concerned. Maybe I'll mention one of my daughters saying, Dada, I saw this article saying that it's really bad, the climate. No? Is it really that bad? And I said, aren't you discussing these in schools? And I said, no. They said they refer to climate change, but the way it is being projected in YouTube because they're watching it, they said it looks so bad. Should we have reason to be concerned? I said yes, but I don't want you to be pushed to the verge of despair here. There are many little things we can do in the household and in the community. We just need to keep emphasizing that there's an emergency, but we can do things even at home. But let's not deceive ourselves into thinking we can solve all the world's problems right away.
I read a thesis about eco-anxiety and
Mm-mm.
gathered all the ideas from the youth about how anxious they were about the world. So this morning's presentation on the youth making the artwork was inspiring because of the hope that they're talking about. The final question I'd give, one last, I'll read it here. I guess this is not about us in this Zoom room, but about other educators not part of this current choir.
Mm-mm.
Climate emergency is understood by many, and many recognize it as real, more or less. But why is it hard to get other teachers to join in climate education in an interdisciplinary manner? Why do you think it's hard to get educators, probably in other disciplines as well, on board?
Mm-mm. Because the materials we get do not underscore this sense of urgency. Even, for example, the Guardian, which is one of the best newspapers in the world, I feel it comes out of the United Kingdom. They had a front page article saying that from today on, we're going to use the word compulsory education. I'd love to have the Inquirer do that. Give me a little more time. I'll try to. That's where I write. No? As people start to use the term more, I'm also a linguistic anthropologist, and so I feel words are very important. Until you get that sense of urgency, people are probably not going to react. No? I'm going to talk also about very quickly about people my age. I was talking with a friend who's in her 70s, and I mentioned the climate emergency. You know what she actually said? She's an educator, retired, and said, We're old. No? This is the next generation's problem. Why do we have to be concerned? No? I said, let them take care of it. No? I just want to read. So I said, no, when you have more power outages and you don't have you're not able to read your books, that's when you'll probably feel. But I'm not a preachy type. So I stopped. I withdraw. I make my case. No?
Well, it's all we have time for an open forum. Thank you very much for that
Thank you as well.
presentation. And our next panel is going to is going to be on strategies towards more sustainable behavior in the context of the new normal. Before that, I would read a slide if that is okay. It's an invitation to everybody here to collaborate with AUN EEC. So higher education institutions and organizations who have ideas for collaboration may please email aun.eec@ateneo.edu if you have ideas. As you can see, this conference is a collaboration between Ateneo and the University of the Philippines, Diliman. If you have other ideas on how we can get together, please just send us an email. So thank you again, Professor Michael Tan. Thank you very much for that keynote lecture. So we move now to the last panel discussion for this morning's plenary. We are going to look at strategies towards more sustainable behavior in the context of the new normal. This panel discussion addresses the question, what sustainability, This panel discussion addresses the question, how can we promote sustainability to our circles and the greater community as we face what appears to be the tail end of the pandemic? In addressing this question, best practices and working initiatives in the past need to be identified and examined, and then evaluated on their applicability as we face global challenges and move toward a new normal. Because Professor Michael Tan has warned us, there's going to be probably another pandemic. This panel will delve into the strategies that are deemed to be effective in communicating the sustainability initiatives to varied audiences and in inspiring others to practice an ecological mindset and competencies to conserve and preserve the environment. Given that sustainability and ecological education are multifaceted topics, this panel will feature responses from an educator in the classroom, from leaders of community-based humanitarian aid organizations, and the panels will also call from the rich experiences from personal sustainable practices to the work that is done by our speakers in their own organizations. As the last panel discussion of the conference, this panel aspires to provide the AUN EEC Conference participants with little nuggets of wisdom that they can carry with them as they head back to their respective institutions and communities. So the first presenter has sent in her recorded presentation. In her open welcome remarks, Dr. Marlu Vilches gave us a little glimpse about Ms. Jenica Dizon. She's currently the country director for Waves for Water, a humanitarian aid organization focused on providing clean water access to underserved communities. Prior to this, she has worked in tourism, in corporate sustainability, and environmental policy. She is one of our own graduates in fine arts, majoring in information design, and she double majored in management and development management from Ateneo de Manila. While at the same time, she received the Loyola Schools Award for Leadership and Service as Most Outstanding Individual. In 2016, she was conferred the Gawad ng Kaunlaran Medal, that's an award for development by the Armed Forces of the Philippines, the second highest distinction presented to civilians and government officials because of her community building efforts. She obtained her master's in water and sanitation for development as a Marshall Papworth Foundation Scholar in the United Kingdom. Most recently, Jenica was recognized as one of the Circle of Excellence awardees for the In Life Young Shiro of the Year in the 12th Asia CEO Awards just last December 2021. She's also a PADI certified rescue diver and also a certified Vinyasa yoga teacher. Ladies and gentlemen, let's listen to the presentation of Ms. Jenica Dizon.
Hi, everybody. This is Jenica Dizon from Waves for Water Philippines. I'm sorry I'm unable to give this presentation live as I'm on field work, but I would like to share just a couple of things that we did at Waves for Water, especially over the pandemic. And as we're slowly transitioning face to face, some of the strategies we employed in effectively engaging with our community online. So let me share a couple of things, and I hope you guys learn a thing or two and how you can also communicate effectively whatever your advocacy is or whatever it is that message that you're trying to get across. So the title of my presentation is No Filter, Now Filtered. The bulk of the work that we do, the backbone of it is really deploying clean water filtration systems. So I'll use that as a sort of analogy in terms of how we've also used it for a big campaign and how it's really just resonated with a lot of the messaging that we've employed and used over in social media and online and offline strategies as well. So just a quick recap about why the work that we do is important. So the work that we do is directly towards the achievement of SDG 6, but as we know, SDG 6 or water really is vital and essential to all life. So you can't, it's really the building block of all the other SDGs in a sense, because you can't achieve zero poverty or no poverty without having clean water access. Same thing with hunger. Malnutrition, stunting, a lot of that has to do not just with the quality of food, but also the quality of water that they're drinking. And so that brings us to health. Having good health and well-being really is foundational to having good education. Kids are able to go to school more if they're not having to walk long distances to fetch water, and also if they're not getting sick from the water that they're drinking. Women and girls are also disproportionately affected by the clean water crisis. And so you actually empower women when you give them access to clean water that is readily available to them. So a lot of the SDGs are actually can be framed in terms of the work that we do, which is water. And I think you could try to take the same strategy in terms of the advocacies that you're also trying to further. And so climate change, we primarily feel in terms of water, and that's through severe flooding or severe droughts. Either way, you affect livelihoods, you affect food supply, infrastructure, so it's really cross-cutting. 1 in 3 people still don't have access to safe drinking water, and that means it's not just water that's readily available, but also should be easily accessible and should be of good quality. And unfortunately, this is not the case in a lot of the communities that we work with. And this is what it looks like downstream. So as you can see, it's women and girls who primarily interface with water, collect water, and also use water for their households as they take on the nurturer and caring roles. So cooking, bathing their kids, making sure there's enough supply for hygiene, for laundry, a lot of it really falls under women's shoulders. And in the Philippines, it's still 1 in 10 who still don't have access to improved water sources. So this is what their water looks like downstream. And this is really just the same water body that they do everything water related for. Unfortunately, diarrhea is still a leading cause of death in the country, and this shouldn't be the case. This is so easily preventable that people are still dying from diarrhea, but unfortunately, it's the reality, especially during disasters when a lot of people's water sources get heavily contaminated, get flood water in them. So there's really a lot of work to be done. And as you can also see here, it's women and children carrying water for their households. So this is really where Waves for Water revolves in. We were founded by a pro surfer, John Rose, back in 2009 when he was surfing in Indonesia when the earthquake struck. So he had a couple of filters with him, and he just saw how it could be deployed to the scale of response that's needed for just immediate clean water access. Since then, we've done projects in 48 countries, the Philippines included, and implemented over 155,000 clean water systems. In the Philippines, Waves for Water also started operating after our global office responded to Super Typhoon Haiyan. So that was in 2013. We take this philosophy of do what you love, help along the way. So what this means is that we're not your typical nonprofit where a lot of the things are segmented or can be heavily bureaucratic. We want, we work with anybody, almost anybody and everybody just that really wants to further access to clean water. So we want to be a platform for people, for individuals, for companies to be able to plug in more purpose into things that they're already doing or passionate about. And really, the goal is to get access to clean water to everybody who needs it, because not just people are thirsty, but because this is really what opens doors to a lot of better opportunities. We also take a help the helpers approach. So our goal as an organization is to be dispensable. We don't want to create dependency. And so really what we do is equip, capacitate, and transfer the technology to community leaders who really have that local wisdom and who know best how to apply the technologies that we are deploying. So these are the solutions that we do: filtration systems, we build rainwater catchments, and hygiene education. And overall, because of this multi-sectoral collaborative community that we've built and are continuing to build, you might want to get involved. We've been able to implement projects in 56 provinces in the country and implement at least 20,000 filters. So really, I think all of us are aware that nonprofits help bridge the gap between the needs of underserved communities and services that are present and available. So while it is government's burden and mandate to provide, access to clean water and centralized water supply to a certain extent, we are all aware that centralized water systems are capital intensive. So in the work that you guys do in your advocacies or in the studies, in your fields of study, what gap are you trying to bridge? But that's also often a question, like what research or what information gap is there that you're trying to bridge? And then how do you get that word out? So for us, we put the premium on the stories. So stories put the face to the statistics. We talked about a lot of numbers a while ago. 1 in 10, 1 out of 3. It's really quite hard to picture this for a lot of people. What does that actually mean? A family, an individual who doesn't have access to clean water and then suddenly has access to it, how have their lives been changed? So a lot of that is the focus of what we put out on social media, especially in our Instagram, now that we've had our own country-specific one. So feel free to follow us, give us a follow. We do produce a lot of content there, but I will show you this video. So this video is what inspired the title of this panel, just really to show how you can take what you do and organize and strategize for something creative and then activate it on a certain day. So for us, one of the days we really capitalize on is World Water Day, which is in March.
The no filter hashtag is one of the biggest on Instagram, and 1 billion people in the world don't have access to clean water because they have no water filters. So what if we could actually filter all the no filter hashtags to bring attention to the global water crisis and help many people around the world? On March 22nd, World Water Day, we announced for every no filter hashtag that 1 gallon of clean water would be made accessible by us. We also invited people to spread the word by posting their own no filter image. Thousands got involved, including athletes, artists, and celebrities. Not just one small organization, but we managed to reach millions and change perceptions. The already popular no filter hashtag saw its highest peak that day, and our fan base doubled. But this means more than followers to us. This means more people wanting to change the world. During the week of World Water Day, our teams in 12 countries distributed 1,000 water filters that each can provide 1 million gallons of clean water for families in need. But it's not just about distributing water filters. It's about training community leaders and actually giving them the tools to empower their community moving forward. From Haiti to Indonesia, Brazil to the Philippines, Mexico to Nepal, 116 million no-filter hashtag posts are now filtered.
So that was one of our very successful campaigns that we did in trying to reinvent and take back an existing, really quite well-known hashtag that will really help us boost awareness about the work that Waves for Water does, and also brand recall, or the organization name in general, and the work that we do. So just picking up from that, another thing that you can really focus on is really telling stories about the work or the impact of the work that you do. But ultimately, you also have to be strategic about how you're going to do things. So really define an impact model, because it can't be, scattered. There has to be a unifying message about the work or the message and your goal that you want to get across. So the action can be what kind of strategy you're also going to employ in your whole overall messaging. And this is an example of that. So you talk about what your big idea is. You talk about your goals. So who are your audiences? It's best that you segment. It's not just one blank, okay, everybody, and you'll talk to the same people in the same manner. People are always going to be in different segments, either by age, by interest, by their capacity to donate, for example, or participate in the activities that you do. And the same goes for research, for the fields of study that we're trying to put forward and bring more attention to. And then what strategies are you going to employ? So really think about what you're going to do, say, for the whole year, what international advocacy or observant days you want to ride on to create more awareness, or for that moment marketing, and then also what channels are you going to use. And then use content buckets, like categorize what the kind of content that you're going to share from, for example, for inspirational content. And then you can also put out educational posts, like if they're observance days, really ride on that moment, marketing to really maximize, say, the use of the hashtag. So really try to get and frame the message towards your advocacy. So for us, that's water. How are women and girls affected by water? And then fundraising. So can be campaign specific, but ultimately when you post also these things, you have to have a call to action, whether that's donate to this initiative, or whether that's click here to learn more, or click here to volunteer, or, there has to be something that you call people to do, because then, what are they going to do with this information after? So for us, aside from that macro awareness educating level, we also just encourage people to start small and do their parts. And that's just a quick background. Sorry, I think I overran the 10 minutes, but I hope people have learned a thing or two. And I would just like to end with this last video, just recapping, or just a small example of the work that we do in the communities in underserved areas across the Philippines. So really what we do as an organization is try to tell stories, not just of individuals, but also of the projects and the partnerships that we do to really get the word out. So I'd like to end with this statistic. A while ago, we said that 1 in 10 people still don't have access to improved water sources, but that also means that 9 out of 10 can help. So it also helps switching things up and focusing on what people can do, switching statistics up and making them involved in part of that conversation. So if there's anything else that you'd like to learn or ask about, or just really exchange ideas, feel free to connect. We are at Waves for Water, at Waves for Water Philippines on Instagram. It's also just my name on Instagram if you'd like to connect, or email me below. Thank you, everybody, and have a good day ahead.
So we have just seen the recorded presentation from Jenica. Now I will introduce our next speaker. Our next speaker is Mr. Rodney, or Rod Galicia, who is the national convener of Aksyon Klima Pilipinas. He was former Philippine manager of the Washington, D.C.-based Climate Reality Project, founded by Nobel laureate Al Gore. Currently, he heads or leads Living Laudato Si Philippines, which is a movement focused on ethical and environmental sustainable investments and practices of the Catholic institutions and individuals. And he voluntarily heads Climate Action for Sustainability Initiative, or CASALI. He is serving as chairperson of a grassroots cultural and ecological organization, Bayay Sibuyanon Inc. He is also a board of trustee member of Greenpeace Philippines and Green Convergence for safe food, healthy environment, and sustainable economy. Tatler Asia included him in the 2018 Generation T list as one of the 50 brightest connectors, creative visionaries, influential innovators, and disruptive talents in the Philippines. He was awarded as one of the 2018 10 Outstanding Young Men in the Philippines. He is also a recipient of the 2013 Gawad Bayani ng Kalikasan, translated in English, that is an award for heroes of the environment. And he is one of the global steering board members for Laudato Si Action Platform. He is an alumnus of the University of Santo Tomas and the author of the book We Are Nature. And he blogs at www.rodgalicia.com. Ladies and gentlemen, let's give a warm welcome to our next speaker, Mr. Rodney Galicia. Have the floor.
Hello, good morning. Good morning, everyone. Am I clear? Not really that choppy.
Yeah,
I think
we can hear
great.
you.
Thank you, thank you. First of all, I would like to recognize indigenous peoples of this country and the world for sustaining balance in nature. Of course, I would like to thank the cause for gathering us today. Thank you for inviting me in this conference. And right now, I would like to discuss our advocacies and our main focus with Living Laudato Si Philippines. So as you know, it's Laudato Si. Laudato Si is the first two words of the song prayer of Saint Francis of Assisi. It means praise be to you. Complete would be Laudato Si Omni Signor. It's the Italian title of the encyclical or letter of Pope Francis on the care of the environment. And it was issued in the year 2015, before the Sustainable Development Goals was actually published and approved by the United Nations. September 23 was the Sustainable Development Goals. May, of course, is for Laudato Si. This is the first encyclical, first document of the Catholic Church concerning the care for our environment.
Rod, may I ask a question? Do you have slides to share today?
Yes, I have slides to share. And let me begin. I'm sharing my slide.
Will you be controlling? You'll be sharing your screen. All right, thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So let me begin with this. As I have said, we will be talking about sustainability, and sustainable development would mean addressing the needs of the present without compromising the capacities of the next generations to survive. But now I'll be talking about the two most important documents concerning the environment in year 2015. Actually, there are three, but I'll focus more on the Sustainable Development Goals and Laudato Si. If we have Sustainable Development Goals, we have Laudato Si goals as well. The question would be, what are the differences and what are the similarities of Laudato Si goals and Sustainable Development Goals? Of course, when we talk about Laudato Si goals, it talks about, and it really explains in brief what Laudato Si document of Pope Francis is all about. If we talk about the two SDGs and LSG, or Laudato Si, SDG is marked with optimism on progress and future. Laudato Si, it contemplates on the state of the present. If we look at the focus of the SDGs, it is focused on achieving goals and targets towards sustainable development. For Laudato Si, it focused on defining and rebuilding the individuals or social groups' relationships with others. Resources. SDGs aims for an efficient use of resources to achieve the goals, with an emphasis take note, on poverty eradication and fueling economic growth. When we talk about Laudato Si, it states that the use of resources has already exceeded the ecological limits without alleviating poverty. How about the root causes of all this, the root causes of these global issues? The SDGs implies the root causes of poverty, environmental decline, and other global issues. For Laudato Si, it directly recognizes the root causes of poverty, environmental decline, and other global issues. How about the approach on economics? The Sustainable Development Goals seek to significantly repair the existing global economic model. Laudato Si, it calls for a slowdown of economic hegemony with more ethical responsibility. And at the end, the calls to action. SDGs largely follows the globalization narrative with the promise of economic growth and more space for international governance and politics. How about Laudato Si? That's the question. Laudato Si calls for a cultural revolution based on more cooperative economics and politics for the common good. But of course, the two of them, secular and the other one is more on the religious faith-based side. If it will work together, then I think we'll have a better place to live in. So we have Laudato Si goals. And Laudato Si goals, as I have said, when we look at it, Laudato Si goals is a discerning response to the ecological crisis. That it is a profound act of care. And there are 7 Laudato Si goals, if you may. The first is response to the cry of the earth. Now, if we talk about response, we need to listen to the cry of the earth. We need to feel what the earth and the flora and fauna and the creation feels. It is a call to protect our common home for the well-being of all as we equitably address, of course, the climate crisis, biodiversity loss, and ecological sustainability. And there are many proposed set of actions. And later on in closing, I'll be sharing with you a very, very important document that Living Laudato Si produced. It's Laudato Si goals and sustainable development goals. And now, the first one is to listen to the cry of the earth. And if we listen and to hear the cry of the earth, say, for example, polluted rivers, and we feel that, and we actually feel how chainsaws cut the trees, etc., etc. And if we do not listen to the cry of the earth, we also do not listen to the cry of the poor, because at the end of the day, those who depend on the bounties and abundance of the earth are those people really on the hinterlands, like the indigenous peoples, like those who are really weak if they are unable to get nutrients from creation, from the earth. So it is actually connected that if we destroy the earth, we also deny all these vulnerable peoples of the interdependence to the rest of creation. It's a call to promote eco-justice, and aware that we are all called to defend human life from conception to death, and all forms of life on earth. The third one is ecological economics, which is really deeply connected to the cry of the earth and the cry of the poor, because at the end of the day, livelihoods are really affected. We need to acknowledge that the economy is a subsystem of human society, which itself is embedded within the biosphere, our common home. And the next one, I'll be highlighting this later on, adoption of sustainable lifestyles. And for Living Laudato Si and Laudato Si, the document, we have that paragraph number 211, which suggests small little eco actions which can be done. And actually, we highlighted this one during the pandemic from 2020, 2021, and until 2022. It is grounded in the idea of sufficiency and promoting sobriety in the use of resources and energy. The next one is ecological education. It is not only limited to curriculum, but in the whole planning process strategy of a school. It's about rethinking and redesigning curricular and institutional reform in the spirit of integral ecology in order to foster ecological awareness and transformative action. The next goal is a little bit deep but practical. Ecological spirituality recovers a religious vision of God's creation and encourages greater contact with the natural world in a spirit of wonder, praise, and gratitude. And at the end, it's not only about prayers, it's not only about studying, etc., but it's also about empowering people, communities. Their voices should be heard, and that's our responsibility. If they have no voice, if they don't have the chance or opportunity to let their voices heard, then those who have access social media, to government officials, we need to let their voices heard. And there are sectors in our society which, of course, this Laudato Si goal should be achieved. The Vatican has actually launched a Laudato Si action platform for families, for parishes and dioceses, for educational institutions, for healthcare institutions, for organizations and groups, the economic sector, and the religious. Now, what can you do as an individual, as a religious sector, as a private sector, from private sector, or from health institutions or universities? Pope Francis has some little eco actions. He suggested this one in his document. We call this hashtag LS211. LS211. That we have our rules. We have that duty to care for creation through little daily actions. First, of course, number one, we have 7, waste management. Avoid use of plastic and paper.
Rodney,
He did not say, hello?
just a 2-minute reminder. Last 2 minutes.
Yes, yeah. Yes, thank you. It did not say don't use plastic and paper, but avoid use of plastic and paper. Segregate waste and reuse. The second is water consumption. Reduce water consumption, but it does not only mean that we only reduce, make tipid of our water consumption. We also need to join advocacies like that of Kaliwa Dam, like that of Parex, for example, etc. Next is food consumption. Cook only what can reasonably be consumed. Because at the end of the day, if there's food waste, think of those people who are hungry and cannot eat. Care for other living beings. So, I mean to say it doesn't mean only about your fellow human beings, but also your fellow living beings, like the butterflies and the bees, etc. Because we have our important role to play in the whole ecosystem. We need to grow trees, not only planting trees, but grow trees. Watch them grow and plant indigenous trees. And of course, energy efficiency. It doesn't mean only about turning off lights, but also using renewable energy. But at the end of the day, you have also sustainable transport. These are 7. Sustainable transport using trains, public transport, and carpooling. So at the end, let me actually share with you a document. I'll be putting that, the soft copy of this document called Sustainable Development Goals and Laudato Si. You may download this for free for all of you. Sustainable Development Goals and Laudato Si towards eco-solidarity. And we hope that you'll be able to read all of this, pages. There are eco actions, the relationship of Laudato Si and SDGs. And with that, if you look at this one, so there are actions like, for example, zero hunger. So you have the things that you can do there and some tips. And I think that's all for today. I'll be entertaining some questions afterwards. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. We just have one more presentation before we go to our Q&A later, and you can ask more questions if you want details. We can ask Rod later. Okay, now I'll introduce our last speaker for this morning's panel. Our final speaker is from Singapore, Dr. Maxine Mo is a lecturer at the Department of Biological Sciences at the National University of Singapore, and she obtained her bachelor's in marine biology from Hawaii Pacific University. She finished her PhD in biological sciences from NUS, where she was awarded as the PhD valedictorian. She went on to do a postdoc degree in NUS as well. Her work deals heavily on aquatic pollution, toxic cyanobacteria in Singapore's reservoir, and reservoir restoration using aquatic macrophytes. Currently, she teaches freshwater biology, conservation, and sustainability related subjects, and she manages internship in conservation and nature-based climate solutions at the Department of Biological Sciences at NUS. To talk about the importance of field trips and ecological modules, post-pandemic lessons, let us all welcome Dr. Maxine Mo. You have the floor.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for this opportunity. I hope my my voice is coming out. I've been teaching quite a lot, and so my voice tends to go a bit missing. Okay, let me share my slides. Okay, can you see my slides?
Yes, we can. And
Okay.
you're clear too.
Okay, great. I'm trying my best to speak in a lower tone so that everyone can hear me. But thank you very much. I just want to thank the conference organizers for inviting me to this panel discussion. I am very honored to share what I know. I'm really right at the beginning of my teaching journey, and to be given this opportunity is really something that I treasure. And I've heard so many great talks from yesterday's plenary to today's plenary talking about the use of social media and increasing the literacy of people around in the public. And so today, actually, my talk is going to talk more about field trips in ecological modules, namely within Singapore. But these lessons can also be translated to Thailand, to Philippines, to all of the Southeast Asian countries, because we have such rich biodiversity. And if we don't bring our students out to the field, they will never see it. Okay, so today I'm going to be talking about the importance of field trips in the modules that I've taught, and some pre-pandemic and post-pandemic lessons. Oh, sorry, I should just say a little bit about myself. So I'm currently a lecturer in the Department of Biological Sciences. Excuse me. And I've been teaching for the past 10 years, but I taught firstly as a graduate student, a part-time teaching assistant, and now I've become a full-time lecturer. So today I'm just going to be talking about some of the pre-pandemic field trips we had, the pandemic field trips, some of the lessons that I've learned from these field trips, and then moving forward in a post-pandemic world. So just to give some background about field trips in ecology, for those of you who are not ecology-based or you don't come from an ecology-based background, field trips in ecology research is very important for our students. So it's the first time that we introduce students to biodiversity and ecology firsthand, because a lot of what they learn is all within textbooks and it's all theoretical. But it's only when we bring them to the field and we get them to really experience some of the ecological interactions and we get them to see it firsthand that they really benefit from a lot of this understanding. And a lot of what they learn in theory can be linked to what is happening in the real world or in practice. Another part of field trips for ecology, or the importance of field trips for ecology, is this experiential learning. So they learn by doing, not so much by being taught in a one-way fashion from the lecturers to them. So they are learning in the field exactly what to do and exactly what needs to be done and how to carry out certain types of ecological research. So I'm really a strong advocate for students actually experiencing what fieldwork is like, how you go about answering a research question, because a lot of times they learn a lot just by being there and understanding the conditions of trying to carry out, for example, a plankton sampling study. And this is also a very effective learning experience for students who are coming from other backgrounds who have not had prior fieldwork experience, but they want to contribute to the field, they want to study ecology, they want to study climate change, and they want to study sustainability and how we can be more sustainable. So another question we can ask ourselves is, are they really necessary? Because now with technology, a lot of field trips have shifted to a more video-based experience, or a more like artificial reality, artificial intelligent reality, where you can actually visit the field just by using your smartphone or YouTube. But it's very important, especially for first year, second year undergraduates, to ignite their interest in ecology and biodiversity. And I'll go further to even say that it's very important for high school students as well. And it also inspires students to pursue research or ecological management when they graduate. They don't have to work for government when they graduate. They don't have to be scientists when they graduate. But a lot of these students go on to work in organizations that deal with some of these issues, for example, within climate solutions, or within corporate companies that are trying to make themselves a little bit more green within their management. So having this experience of the field will also help to inform them and help them to move their companies forward. So this is just some background about how field trips translate to learning outcomes. So I'll just go through the first one. So for example, if you have a concept of active learning in the field, students can work in groups, they can measure, for example, fracture spacing in outcrops, they can measure plankton biodiversity or biomass, and then they share these findings with the whole class. And when we go back to the classroom, how this translates to their learning outcomes is that they learn how to work in groups, they learn how to actually do some of the laboratory work, and then finally they do share their findings with the whole class. Okay, so I've talked a little bit about the positives about having field trips in modules, but there are some drawbacks that I also need to mention, because not all educators can actually participate or can incorporate these field trips, and there's a multitude of reasons why. So for us, actually on our side, it takes a lot of planning in order for field trips to go off successfully. So a lot of this has to do with safety issues, liability issues, lack of funding, budget constraints. Sometimes the weather is also not really working with us. And I recently just had a field trip where we had to carry out the field trip in a slightly drizzly weather, but my students were really, really keen on it, and they were really just able to push through. A lot of times, especially us living in the tropics, and a lot of our Southeast Asian countries are in the tropics, when we are faced with inclement weather, sometimes it's the safety of the students that we must put before the field trip. So a lot of times we have to actually cancel field trips or postpone them. Next comes a lot of the logistics to do with field trips. So that is looking at logistics of arranging buses, making sure that the risk assessments are carried out, really responding to any emergency in the field, and also getting permits for different field trips. Some of the drawbacks for students would be something along the lines of them preparing themselves for the field trip. So understanding what needs to be done, understanding how they need to prepare physically, how they need to have that adequate level of knowledge before entering a field site, for example, of their own safety, their own abilities as students, and also maybe possibly their family obligations, their job obligations, and so on. So in the field trips that we used to carry out pre-pandemic, we used to have very, very large groups of students that would go out to the field, and each group would be up to 15, even more, maybe 20 students per group, with one teaching assistant or one lecturer attached to this group. So as you can see, so these are just some of the photos I'm showing you from some of our field trips that we took in Pulau Tioman in Malaysia, and in Singapore by the beach in Changi. So a lot of these field trips were a lot of fun, but they were quite logistically and safety-wise extremely tiring for the teaching staff. It was also very dependent on how well it was organized by the module coordinator and by the teaching staff. So it's mostly just led by the teaching staff. And there were less student-led activities. So students were just told to show up at a certain time and not to bring anything of their own, but just prepare and wear whatever they needed to wear. But most of the logistic items were brought by the TAs and by the students themselves. So during the pandemic, how this changed is that we had to actually modify our group sizes. So we had to have only 3 to 5 students per group within Singapore. And we couldn't do overseas field trips because that just was not allowed at that point. So we had more teaching assistants, we had more days for repeated field trips just to reduce the group sizes without compromising on the integrity of the field trip and what was done. You also had a reduction in the number of field trips per module just because it was too much for some of the teaching staff to handle within modules that were very large, for example, 100 students or 80 students. We also resorted to sometimes having e-field trips or virtual field trips or video briefings to allow the students to have a bit more of scaffolding before they went out to the field. Another thing that actually I tried to do a lot more of during the pandemic was actually this student-led self-guided field trips. And sometimes these field trips would go very, very well. And I have some photos to share with you later. But sometimes a lot of these field trips, if students weren't properly prepared by instructors, it ended up being more of a field trip or a walkabout that they had to carry out without knowing properly what to do. And then during the pandemic as well, I switched a lot of my traditional lab report assignments to social media assignments or video assignments, just to get students to interact more with each other during the pandemic, and also to get them to use a new media for science communication. So some of the lessons learned during the pandemic years was that small group sizes actually facilitate learning in a better way. Whereas those large group sizes that we used to use during the pandemic, sometimes it was very hard to hear the teaching assistants. It was very hard to hear us when we are trying to talk, and it leads us to lose our voice, like what is happening to me currently. And so the small group sizes were really a really good move. The video briefings were also a very good move because it helps to save time in the field, and students watch the video briefings according to their own schedule and allowing them to get prepared for the field trips. So they have a clearer understanding of what's going on. They have better scaffolding for their learning. And then, of course, better safety management, because we don't have to wait till we get to the field to carry out the safety briefing. We could already carry out the safety briefing during the video briefing. So this is just some example of how we carried out some of our video briefings during that time. This is with my co-lecturer, Dr. Chong Kwek Yen. So we carried them out in the lab, but we were, of course, live streaming, and the students were watching us, and then they would know what to do when we went to the field. So some other lessons that we learned during the pandemic years is that self-directed field trips can be a really good initiative because it helps to increase student awareness and student initiatives in the field. It gives them greater independence, and students learn more and gain better insight into the activities that they're doing. They understand why they're doing the activities and what's the motivation behind them. So the assignments set and graded were also based on these particular field trips. So students are motivated to do a good job, of course. So these are just some examples of a student self-guided field trip that I conducted in my graduate level class, which is freshwater conservation. So I got students to go out to different sites within Singapore to actually evaluate the conservation values of these sites.
Maxine, last 2 minutes.
Okay, thank you. To evaluate the conservation value of these sites, and then they went out, they took photos, and they made comparisons, and this helped them to learn a great deal. So the next type of assignment that I changed to was the social media assignment, and it was really fun and effective for the students. It increased their scientific communication skills and their creativity, which the plenary speakers talked about earlier, about using artistry and encouraging students to create content for science communication. So this is just to give you some example of some of the posts that were carried out. I have bigger pictures of them here. So they actually had to write a caption that was within 2,000 characters, come up with the photos, come up with videos, giving the general public some information about the ponds that they sampled for phytoplankton, and giving them information about individual plankton taxa and how that relates to the public. So how are we going to move forward after the pandemic, understanding all of the lessons that we've learned? So firstly, field trips are very important and they must be maintained in ecological modules for students to learn effectively about ecology and about the environment and about conservation in general. Field trips can also help to facilitate learning, and they need to be modified, and they can be modified in various ways by reducing the number of field trips, having smaller group sizes, having more student-led field trips with proper scaffolding, having e-field trips. And field trips can also be used as a way to engage with students and promote student-led activities. One of the last lessons is to actually change up assignment types instead of traditional reports, and let students actually have more creativity and more freedom to do social media reports, blogging, maybe even video assignments. The last one is also, they could also design identification keys for certain different taxa if needed. So my last slide here, I just want to leave you with this quote. In the end, we will conserve only what we love. We will love only what we understand, and we will only understand only what we are taught. And this quote was actually brought to my attention by a student of mine who I taught last year, and she sent it to me as a Teachers' Day present, and she wanted to explain to me that she had gained her newfound love for the environment and for conservation because of what I taught her. And I think that this is very important, like that we as educators understand the impact that we have on our students and how our passion is able to inspire them to conserve our environment and to live a more sustainable lifestyle, even after they graduate. So with that, I want to thank you so much for your attention. And I want to thank the students of the many modules that I have taught in the last 10 years, the professors and my educators within NUS and within Hawaii Pacific University, because those field trips deeply impacted me, and it helped me to crystallize what I would like to teach to future generations. So thank you very much.
Thank you. And we invite both Rod and Maxine to answer the question. So I'm just going to read two questions that both of you can answer. The first question has to do with design for behavioral change, means that we target desired behavior. And so you talked about initiatives and ideas. How do you measure that the desired behavior can be attained by those initiatives? So maybe for Maxine, a follow-up would be, how is it not just science experiments as usual that are done in the field, but it crosses towards a behavioral lifestyle or mindset change through the field trips? And then for Rod, I know that you also founded, I think, an environmental news agency, an independent faith-based environmental news agency. I don't know how to pronounce this correctly. It's Economedia, is it? Or Economedia? So maybe you can also include some, reporting from that angle. But our panel really is focused on sustainable behavior, how to attain that. So I don't know which one of you wants to answer first. Oh, sorry, there's another question. I'll read it also in the chat box, privately sent to me anonymously. Given your work in your, experience plays a crucial role in raising awareness and promoting action among the youth, at least in the Philippine context. It is often challenging to get the youth out in nature because they tend to flock to malls with their peers. Given your work in your organization, how can you make experiential ecological education more sexy for the youth? Okay, so please just combine all the questions and I'll call who wants to go first. Who wants to take a crack at that?
Rodney, do you want to go first? Or?
Okay, Rod.
Yeah. for Living Laudatos in Philippines, we have engaged with some universities and even educational institutions. Like if I may mention Mid College, they have courses and NSTP, the National Service Training Programs, and community work. So we took a chance of maximizing their expertise on social media, etc. And if you look at the handbook that I shared, there are posters there, and there are efforts. Those actually written in the handbook are a result of many conversations with the youth, among the youth, the posters, the articles, and connecting that to Economedia, for example. Economedia is a faith-based news agency which reports ecological issues in the Philippines, but later on it would all be Philippines, but Asia and the world. We are open for students and for the young people. Any kind of literature. It can be a poem. It can be music, video. So we're open to them. And for communities, grassroots communities, if they have press releases, if they have statements and stories, we have no bars. We will publish whatever they wish to publish. It's a free opportunity for indigenous peoples, for the young people to show their talent for writing, for video, for photos. For as long as this is science-based and fact-based, we fact-check also all this. So this is a unique platform, even for schools, for collaboration. And if they wish to submit any, just contact Economedia. Just as economedia.org will publish your stories. Even if it is an anecdote or an opinion piece, then we'll publish it for you. No possible screening or whatever. Of course, in the spirit of the common good and our common home, we will do it for you. Thank you.
Maxine, sorry.
No worries, you can call me Max. Okay, so I'll answer your second question first about how to get the youth out of malls and into the field for experiential learning. I find that the best way to engage with young people and youth is actually starting when they are really young. So I've actually brought a lot of little children, a lot of kids out to intertidal walks, walks in different parks. So this is just a way that I do a little bit of outreach and a little bit of understanding for students at that age. And honestly, when you start going out to the field when you're young, it'll just become a part of your life when you're older. You'll always want to do it. And so that's what I encourage educators to do. So if you get any chance to bring out groups of maybe even volunteers who want to come up with you, like even children within Singapore, a lot of the primary schools and the kindergartens actually have a lot of field trips where they bring kids out to the field, they bring them to parks, they get them to appreciate nature, and also get them to look at the wildlife that is present within Singapore. And then you get them to think a little bit more like, oh, Singapore has all of these natural environments, we should protect them, we should basically care for them. And I think this is the same for the Philippines and for Malaysia, Thailand, and so on. The other question was about how we, sorry, could you remind me of this first question again?
Yes. How is this not just a science experiment as usual that is in the
yes.
field, but leads to the desired sustainable behaviors that we are targeting?
Yeah, so I find that when trying to target these sustainable behaviors, actually, honestly, I find the best, most effective way currently is by picking up trash. Honestly, I feel that picking up trash, be it at the coastal cleanups or just in the neighborhood that they live in, any of these trash collection events actually gets them to think a little bit more about what they do as even kids, even teenagers, it gets them to spend a little less on disposable single-use plastics, and it gets them to really think about, okay, if I'm buying a food item, should I be buying it from this stall that has a disposable plastic, or should I be bringing my own container? So this kind of hard truths, I feel that is very good for students, the public to learn. So within Singapore, we have the International Coastal Cleanup, which goes, I think, once a year, but there are small little individual groups that bring students out to clean up rubbish. So cleaning up rubbish, I think you don't have to be old to do it. You can be 3 or 4 years old to pick up rubbish. And this type of trash cleanup actually helps them to understand that this is the amount of waste that we put out, and how can I prevent this? How can I not be a part of this trash accumulation? Yeah.
Hashtag, what was that, Rod? LS211.
Yeah.
These are the little things that these are the micro
Yeah.
that we are all encouraged to do, and
Yeah.
that's but
Definitely.
unfortunately, that's all we have time for. It's 11:59. We have to close our panel. Thank you very much to both of you for your wonderful presentations. And now my task is to call the final speaker for the day for her closing remarks. I'd like to invite Dr. Maria Asunta Huyegkeng or Achut, our Executive Director at AUN EEC. She's a professor at the Department of Educational Leadership and Management at Ateneo de Manila University. Well, Achut, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Nikki. And it's really wonderful to see all of you. It's always a pleasure to see everyone at this annual conference of the ASEAN University Network for Ecological Education and Culture, even if it's only through our Zoom boxes. Especially because of the pandemic, our experience of the world has shifted from what you probably heard, VUCA, volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous world, to one which they now call BANI. BANI stands for brittle, anxious, nonlinear, and incomprehensible. Brittle because there's no slack, no resilience, and the seeming stability shatters when forces hit the weak point. Anxious because our world is full of forces that can bring depression and or passivity to our people, especially during the time of the pandemic. Non-linear because systems have interactions that end in very complex outcomes. Incomprehensible because outcomes don't seem to make sense. Thus, we need to have a BANI response to. We need to have breakthrough insights that can only come from having a sense of the whole of the system. We need to be agile, see things with new perspectives, and have the interiority that allows us to make meaningful choices. Yesterday, we heard about how we could develop this BANI response, drawing from the past and driving us into the future. Our indigenous practices and beliefs could guide our choices and behaviors. Best practices from different universities show how sustainability thrusts can thrive even during the pandemic. This morning, we saw how art is such a wonderful tool in reimagining ecological education. We can engage the youth to respond to climate emergency, and we can behave sustainably in the new normal. We could not have had a rich and meaningful conference without our plenary speakers and panelists. And on behalf of the conveners, I wish to extend our heartfelt gratitude and appreciation to them for sharing their time and expertise with us. Thank you to our speakers, Dr. Jet Yasol Naval, Mr. Andrew Freeband, and Professor Adrian Yenik, Professor Emeritus Mike L. Tan. Thank you to our panelists. Yesterday, we had Honorable Teddy Bagilat, Dr. Zainal Sanusi, Dr. Sharina Halim, Professor Emeritus Butch Shaltita, Professor Leong Chun Heng, Architect Sadaf Ansari, Dr. Varapat Inkarorit, Ms. Jenica Dizon, Mr. Rod Galicia, and Dr. Maxine Mo. This conference was also twice as rich because we partnered with the University of the Philippines, Diliman, who brought their network and resources to this conference. It was great to see old friends from previous interactions, and it was also great to have made new friends. Dr. Maria Teresa Payongayong and her team were wonderful partners. They helped us in inviting resource persons, reviewing abstracts, preparing and sending tokens, and documenting the conference, and the list goes on. We can only look forward to another collaboration in the future. Thank you very much, Tess, for your generosity and leadership. Our sincere thanks to the AUN leadership for their continued support. Thank you, Dr. Choltis, for being a presence, a friend, a guide to this thematic network. Thank you to our university administrators for your support, Father Bobby Yap of the Society of Jesus, Dr. Sinch, Banzon Bautista, Dr. Fidel Nemenzo, and Dr. Marlu Vilches. You have always been encouraging in all our efforts. And it has been a tradition to have Dr. Nikki Carci Cruz as MC for our conference because of the energies she brings. Thank you, Nikki. And I hope you do not tire of invitations from the AUN EEC. Our thanks to our session facilitators yesterday, Dr. Lau Hamero, Dr. Ines Ponce de Leon, Ms. Trinket Canlas, and thanks in advance to our session facilitators this afternoon, Ms. Sayarchana Darida, Dr. Len Espiritu, Dr. Isabel Martin. We thank our scholastics who led the invocation on the 2 days, Brother Carlo Lacang and Brother Chesco Labuntog, both of the Society of Jesus. Many people also have worked behind the scene for this conference. Our thanks to the abstract review panel, Dr. Shao Campomanar II, Dr. Carlo De Pano, Dr. Lujay Sonido, Dr. Len Espiritu, Dr. Ines Ponce de Leon. We could not have asked for a better team behind the scenes. You have made all our plans come to life. Thank you to Vixon, Luge, and architect James Christopher Buno. Thank you, Ms. Jean Hardelesa Mijares and Mr. Chris Castillo and the technical team for sharing your experiences from the past conferences. And our special thanks to Dr. Eman Delocado, who is the force behind this conference. Thank you, Eman, for all the hard work and attention to detail that truly made this event seamless. We are ending this morning plenary session with these thoughts, but we still have the parallel sessions this afternoon, 2 for paper presentations and 1 for the Turn It Around workshop with Ms. Saya Darira. To all of you who found time to be with us in this conference, thank you. We hope you will help us spread the word about spreading the good news of ecological education and culture. We need more students, faculty, and citizens who will remember that we are only guardians of a world that is passed on to future generations. Maraming salamat po at mabuhay.
Thank you very much. And with that closing remarks, we put this plenary to a close. The instructions for the afternoon sessions will be given to us by Chris Castillo. Chris, you have the floor.
Okay. So good afternoon, everyone. And again, thank you for your presence this morning. We would like to invite you to the parallel breakout sessions happening later. It starts at 2 o'clock, but we would like for you to enter your chosen parallel sessions at around 1:30. All right. We have 3 options here presented on the screen, but if you'd like to know more about these and you'd like to sign up for them in case you haven't, please click on the link that I provided in the Zoom chat. We'd also like to request the presenters to please enter the Zoom room before 1:30. All right, again, that's before 1:30 for the presenters, and for those who'd like to listen and to watch, please come in before 2 p.m. So with that, thank you very much, and we hope to see you later. Back to you, Nikki.
And our morning plenary is over. Thank you, everybody. Have a good lunch. Enjoy your break. See you in the afternoon. Bye, everybody.